That's how it's gonna be, a little test tube.
It's most likely to be a highly infectious virus.
Guy steps out of Times Square station, smashes it on the sidewalk.
Welcome to the Zero Net Review, a show dedicated to handcrafted studies of genre fiction. I'm author DC McNeil, and I'm joined by Patrick Laverne, a harried employee on the 17th floor, realizing their life of crime might be spiraling into the abyss.
Which character is this?
Could be anyone on 17, Pat. Pat's
Okay,
like, what happened on 17?
Yeah, well, I've got an acid marker in my pocket, and I'm ready to make some money.
Excellent. That's the grind set that the influencers don't want you to know about. That's the secret they don't want to tell you. It's all about that acid marker money. And I'm joined as always by Darth, a plucky, down on his luck night manager, excited by the opportunity to invest all of his life savings with definitely not shady Jonathan Alcides.
Hello there.
Welcome back, as always, to our continued
Yeah,
study of him.
Was trying to figure out when you were sarcastically like, who would you be? And I was like, on the second read through, it really hit that there was one guy there who was kind of an idiot and literally didn't know they were doing illegal stuff. And I'm like, that probably would have been me.
Yeah, it's really good. They're in like the big all hands where everyone's realizing it's all gone wrong, and he's just like, but we didn't do anything wrong, right? Guys? It's very good. Welcome back to our continued study of the post-apocalypse, brought to you by Zero Indent Patreon subscribers who help make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. This week we are reading through part 2 to the end of Glass Hotel, so picking up where we left off, finishing the book. It's going to be a weird episode. We all were saying that before we started recording. I haven't slept in like a week. Patrick's barely awake. Darth is himself. So limitations all round. Now, I finished this book. There's two things I want to say before we get started. The first is that I did a disservice on the last episode, Pat, where you asked a little bit about Emily St John Mandel's relationship with sex. And I was like, gosh, she's just not that interested in writing about it. I was wrong. Someone on the Patreon DM'd me and went, look, and they asked to remain anonymous, fair enough. They were like, listen, it was a really eloquent point, but you need to read The Singer's Gun, because that is Emily St John Mandel's book functionally about sex. So I did that this week. And The Singer's Gun is a novel that basically follows they're sort of I guess they're second generation immigrant cousins, Anton and Arya. Their parents run like a clothing store. It's kind of like a tchotchke furniture thrift store, antique store blend in Manhattan. And all of the furniture they sell is stolen. And the book kind of follows Anton's life, and growing up, he immediately falls in love with his cousin. And that's kind of like the beginning of his like sexual awakening. And then marries a woman that he definitely shouldn't marry, who they have a terrible relationship, and is having an affair with this woman, Eleanor, the whole time. The book is sort of about, it's still written quite keenly from the female perspective, in that it's about the connection and the absence of that connection as it relates to sex that like actually matters. So like Eleanor, the character, while she's having this affair, she's in a relationship with this boyfriend, Gabriel, and he's been on these like depression pills that mean he has no sex drive. That's kind of why she starts the affair in the first place. But the book really centers like, it's not lurid and it's not torrid. It's like really dealing with these things as like elemental facts of reality. And so I think that to more thoroughly answer your question from last time, Pat, I think that Mandel is not necessarily interested in sex itself as like an act, but the things that it produces in us as people, and the things that it produces in us in its absence as well. And the way that some connection can be sustained without it, and some connection can't be sustained without it. But it's sort of reading that book, it really felt like she'd sat down and went, let me think about this once, so I don't have to worry about it ever again. You know, it's that type of exercise.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Like, she's very interested in the complicated, messy relationships that come from such intimate acts, right? Like, and the before and after of that kind of thing. But yeah, it sounds like from that description as well that she also still doesn't go into the very, as you said, carnal aspects of sex and stuff. Yeah.
I think like a male author, and certainly I've noticed, like the way that I write about sex insofar as I have, because obviously the Main Odd Trick series is like young adults, so it's not really in that series. But I'm working on like a side novel set in the same universe, just to figure out like what does sex in this universe like mean and look like. And so like yeah, I guess I'm interested in Sea of Tranquility because that ends up being a book about a lot of things, but seminally it becomes a book about like I think everything Mandel has written, which is like how do you not live the wrong life and then die, right? That line from Station 11. And a big part of that to her seems to be who do you choose to be vulnerable to over like large periods of time. I think that's like a foundational piece of her corpus.
I think it's worth pointing out that the both Station 11 and this ended up being much more about like relationships than about whatever the quote unquote mystery was, right? And I think the same thing can be said about all of the sex scenes that we've not seen in this book, because each one is just indicative of a relationship either shifting or something like that, where the point of it is what is being indicated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, like in the few scenes where it implies like Jonathan and Vincent have sex, like it's very, there's a lot of information there about like what kind of relationship they have, which is a transactional one.
Yeah, and it's sort of and then you get later on where she has that encounter with Oscar, and the line that I'm sure I have highlighted in my notes somewhere is like she has sex with him, and she basically like in doing so she remembers what it's like to have sex with someone that she wants to sleep with. I just recall that being like a really a very vivid concept, one that I think some of us certainly can relate to when you've been in those positions where you might be bouncing from relationship to relationship trying to find a good fit, and you finally meet someone and it's like, oh yeah, this is like what it's supposed to feel like, there's like a but also that also feels like a pressure valve. So yeah, I'm interested when we get there. I guess to start with, what did you guys think of the book? I want to go to Darth first because I know that he's been ruminating on this for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, and I didn't quite make it fully through a second read of it, but I got pretty close. And I enjoyed it. Maybe not quite like as fully the second time because I already kind of knew where things were going. So this time it was much more of just like enjoying the way that things were interwoven. Whereas the first time you're a lot more engrossed because you don't know where things are leading. But I very much enjoyed it. I thought a little too deeply about certain parts. Like I have all of these numbers written down about the Ponzi scheme and how I don't understand why it didn't work. So we can get to that.
Okay, I have an easy answer to that because I understand how Ponzi schemes work. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Pat, what about you? I feel like this book is tailored specifically for you in some ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm very, very like warm on this book. It was so good. It's just more of what I liked about Station 11. I mean, I think I said that last time, but just big, complicated, messy feelings of ennui and like a spectrum where on one pole is banality and the other pole is like absolute like severity, and like there's the emotions in this book and the context of these people's lives just like sway so like dramatically between them, and yeah, it also it's kind of spooky how deep this book manages to like burrow into your experience as like a human being, and like how relatable some of the thoughts that the characters have, and moments where they're experiencing or observing something, and then they self-reflect about them experiencing or observing the thing, and then self-reflecting on that and why they think the things that they're thinking as they're experiencing something. And it's a Station 11 as well in the TV show, and I feel like this book is like really captures something innate about the human experience. And yeah, it was just so compelling. It was a joy to read this book, and kind of want to go back and read Station 11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely should if you have the time. I think that perhaps I'm just concerned that you guys will be disappointed by how less complete the Station 11 novel is than the TV show. Is the only thing. Like Somerville did a lot of work to make it feel like a whole story, whereas it was really written as like the start of a trilogy, I think.
I actually had the thought reading this one towards the end where you start getting into a lot of visual stuff with Al-Qaeda when he's having his memory issues. And I'm like, this should have been a show. Like the way that this is written, I understand what they're, what the author was going for, and everything makes sense and it's fantastic, but this needed to be done visually for it to really hit home. So you could see Al-Qaeda like walking through the different parts of his life and walking from room to room and not understanding that he's walking through his memories and getting them all jumbled up together and everything. So I wonder if the same thing where Station 11, the book, might be disappointing to some degree, comparing it to the show. If this one also, if it were done by really good filmmakers, if it would be a superior story to the novel, because so much of the story, the way that this author tells it, is very, very visual.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could see that. I think the benefit of this being prose is that it, like to what Pat was saying, it kind of burrows itself in your brain as you read it. Like it kind of it occupies space while the book is open. And then when you close the book and walk away, like it still influences you. I think from a visual perspective, I do kind of agree with you. I think that like this book has some of the most arresting and interesting visuals. Which conveniently brings me to something I've been meaning to bring up for a couple of weeks. Gentlemen, I believe that in your possession, you should both have an envelope that I've told you not to open.
Oh, shit.
Oh.
It's finally time. I think it's got a few, like, it's got a few holes from my cats biting into it, but...
Yeah, what did I write on yours, Pat?
It says...
For the podcast, open when instructed. Darth, what's on the front of yours?
'Tis my full name and open when instructed.
Now, gentlemen, without further ado, and the instruction here is very important, please open the envelope, but do not yet read the contents.
I want to point out how long that we've had these in our possession, because it's been months, right? It's been a minute, and I was like, he's forgotten about this, and I only kept it so that one day, years down the road, I could pull it out and be like, hey, you never remembered about this, did you? So
all will reveal itself
where's
momentarily. Yeah, where's the money? You're the Jean Ralphio. Money, please.
Money, please.
All right. Well, without further ado, gentlemen, please open your scripts to page 1. I will be reading the.
Oh my goodness!
I will be reading the narration, and you will be playing yourselves. Scene 27. Interior. Morning. The hotel. Light patinas over the shifting green-white surface of the lake. We crossfade from the water to the hardwood behind the bar of the hotel lobby, the reflective surface throwing 1,000 white shards of light against bottles of whiskey and vodka and bourbon. We slowly pan back from the shelf to reveal a huge, long shadows dicing the lobby into uneven portions. JM, a middle-aged man in a crimson suit, sits at one end of the bar, nursing a glass of bourbon. His hair tumbles about his shoulders. Grey peppers his beard, an impression of a second goatee, foregrounding whiter colours in the years to come. This is a man buoyed by time and loss equally. He sips his drink rather unseriously, the glass a distraction before anything else. Our camera reverses and a figure in a pale sweatshirt and matching grey sweatpants crosses the lobby, his flip-flops beating against the cold floor. Patrick swings a duffel onto the bar top, settles on a bar stool.
He's late.
JM checks his wristwatch, the face a cartoonish smiley face.
He didn't tell you why we're here then. My back hurts. He didn't even pay for business class. I'm getting too old for this.
I'm as confounded as you are.
The elevator door swings open with a ding. A rogue in a black suit with a graying reddish beard and coiffed hair strikes across the hardwood as if he owns the very building. You're early! Patrick and JM exchange a sideways glance.
You're enjoying this, aren't you?
Don't know what you're talking about.
Don't.
Patrick, stay on script. The rogue
Sorry,
pulls
I
up.
thought that was me.
The rogue pulls up a bar stool between the two men. The bartender wordlessly draws a tall glass of beer for the rogue. She tilts her head in acknowledgement, her blue hair spilling over her shoulder. She disappears through a door into the storeroom.
It seems like a lot of effort for a joke.
What makes you think it's a joke?
3 men walk into a bar.
An expensive joke, too.
Right, yeah. Well, look, I brought you here to know where I've been a lot for a very specific reason. I'm concerned or developing a concern, but I still don't understand this book.
What are you talking about? Is this a bit?
No, I'm serious. I've read this book like 3 times before, and I still don't really get it. Like, what's it doing?
Oh, you mean this book?
Right. JM glances between the two, as if he's misunderstood an inside joke.
This is gonna be one of those things that, like, I don't get it, and you're gonna be like, why doesn't he get it? It's so obvious to me, and then I'm gonna be like an asshole next podcast.
No, I just think you're not really looking at the right thing, you know?
Right, yeah, exactly, Pat. And I think this is, well, it's not a story the Jedi would tell. It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis was a Okay, I don't have to do the rest. You get the idea. When I thought of this bit, now, listen. I've been on a mission, I would say, the last sort of 9 months to, like, undermine Darth as much as I can as a human being. Just sort of as a side hobby. And I wrote this. This was when you guys first were like, oh, yeah, I really want to throw out the schedule and do Glass Hotel. And I was sitting there being like, oh, shit, I don't know what this book is about. And I thought it would be funny to pre-write that ahead of time, to foreground the fact that I still don't know what this book is about, and I'm kind of worried. So that was a really expensive joke. It took way too much logistics. It involved... I had to bribe Darth's brother, Eric, to deliver that for me. And here we are. Expect more real-life bits in the future.
So, I don't think it's not like a fantastic story, but when I was at his house, and the child, the 4-year-old, points to the letter and says, "Uncle, that's for you," and I go, "Are you sure, buddy?" And then I was like, "Oh, it has my name on it."
Incredible.
So Eric didn't give it to me. He left it on the counter, and the child
even better. So you guys are welcome. That's an excerpt from my upcoming teleplay adaptation. My
Fantastic.
my 6-part HBO limited series adaptation of Glass Hotel. You're both in it, so you'll find out about it sooner or later.
It's a bit derivative of Star Wars and real life.
Okay. All right. I wasn't asking for notes. You're just talent, all right? You just read what's on the page. You don't get to have an opinion.
You're just a little waveform for me. That's all you are.
Yeah, you're a little toy in my toy box. So there you go. That's you guys are welcome.
Thank you.
This should have been signed. This should have been. I could have framed this.
That would have been so much harder. Like, it was easy enough to be like, Eric, do you have a printer? If I had to be like, Eric, I need to internationally ship you a letter. We're adding layers of complexity. Okay, good stuff. Thank you for entertaining that bit. Now that we've wasted everyone's time, Patrick, when you're ready, you'll be pleased to hear the summary for Glass Hotel, Part 2.
In 2009, Jonathan Alkaitis lives in prison. He is struggling to adapt to his new reality and imagines a counterlife where he fled the US for Dubai. This idea tortures him, and his sense of reality grows very thin indeed. Elsewhere, Vincent boards the Neptune Cumberland, a container ship, as the assistant cook. She falls into a relationship with Jeffrey Bell, and for the first time in her life, Vincent is happy. Actually, properly happy. But wait, the book started with her drowning at sea. This can't bode well. In the closing months spent in the Kingdom of Money in late 2008, Vincent learns that her brother Paul is a passingly successful composer. Only it seems that Paul's success in large part is due to him stealing Vincent's home videotapes from a time in Cayette. A few days later, Vincent attends Jonathan's Christmas party, only for the Kingdom of Money to come tumbling down around them. The investment fund is no success at all, but a Ponzi scheme. As Jonathan's criminal enterprise falls apart, the Christmas party must go on. But there is an exquisiteness in foregone endings arriving, isn't there? And so, even as this country collapses, Vincent and Oscar make love, and in doing so, Vincent opens a window into a potential future where she no longer needs to live a lie. We follow a number of lives in the wake of Jonathan's arrests. Olivia, Leon, Oscar, Ella. The world and economy collapse around us. Meanwhile, in prison, Jonathan's reality continues to dissolve. In 2018, Leon Prevant finds a job at the Marriott on the border of Colorado and Mexico. He receives a call from Miranda about the disappearance of a cook from the Neptune Cumberland, drawing Leon from a life of transience in the wake of the scam. We learn that back in 2005, Paul was paid to write Why Don't You Swallow Broken Glass in Hotel Cayette by Ella Kaspersky. In 2008, Hotel Cayette shuts down with no buyer and no money. Walter stays behind as the hotel caretaker, living by himself indefinitely. Later, Paul lives as a successful composer and musician with a heroin addiction. He sees Vincent at the exact moment of her death at the sea. At sea.
I think I was trying to say like
Vincent,
at sea, but then like also like on the sea. That's Reed's interpretation, Pat.
As Vincent goes overboard, she moves beyond time, space, and memory, haunting or seeming to haunt the people in her life that mattered, especially Paul. In the end, Vincent joins her mother on the beach in Cayette. Whenever and wherever that may truly be, Vincent is finally home, finally returned to the ocean.
Because the first chapter is called Vincent in the Ocean? Okay. Very complete novel. I really like how this ends. I still don't really know what to make of the whole thing, but where do we want to start? I guess we should start on the first page of this reading, because it's absolute bars from the jump. Welcome to another episode of Zero End Review, where we basically just read the whole fucking book. You're welcome. This part, so we go from like, this is the start of part 2. This is, I've got this on 142 in the EPUB. And it's the Counterlife 2009. No star burns forever. Words scratched into the wall by Arcadis's bunk, etched so delicately and in such spidery fashion that from any distance at all, they look like a smudge or a crack in the paint, at exactly the right spot so he sees them when he turns his face to the wall. He's never had much interest in earth sciences, but of course he knows the sun is a star. Everyone knows that. So is the point just that the world will eventually end? In which case, why not just write that? Alkaitis has limited patience for poetry. And it's the sentence, Alkaitis has limited patience for poetry, is such, like, characterization in a, like, if you want a lesson of, like, how do you so thoroughly communicate so much about a character, that sentence is, like, a great case study. it's so like poignantly. It's the fact that it's like, I think another writer would say like Alcitus has no patience for poetry, but limited. Like the implication that Alcitus has enough bandwidth to realize it's important, but is arrogant enough to dismiss it anyway. It's so potent as a way to communicate something about this guy.
The whole Alcitus thing in prison captures my imagination so much. I think it might possibly be like my favorite like sort of like line in the book, because I don't know why, like a prison just captures my imagination a lot. The idea that like you're just like trapped in this tiny box for the rest of your life kind of thing, and like how would you have to adapt your mind and your experience and your way of being in order to exist and cope in that reality. And like I feel like that all those emotions like Jonathan goes through in this book or in the chapters when he's in prison. And yeah, I mean this is a bit later on, but I like how he sort of also lets himself slip into delusion to cope better as well. I think that's like, I can totally imagine doing that.
But he's like so aware of it as it's happening. He's like, he starts to be like, oh, this is bad, but also like it's fine, like it's helping. Like there's this really great like he's like going insane, but he knows it's happening kind of thing.
And yeah, he sort of like puts like feigns of fight, like trying to like resist it, but like I guess sort of thing with I don't know. I guess there's like a cognitive dissonance going on there where like he doesn't want, and to what you're saying about that line where he's like he has limited patience for poetry, like as if he's like some very like grounded, you know, worldly person. And so, you know, he's like, well, there's no point, there's no practical use in slipping into delusion. You know, I need to keep my wits about me. But then as soon as he says that, he like indulges in another delusion, and like, you know,
yeah,
it's interesting.
I am curious if we're on the same page with, he has Alzheimer's or something, right? Like this is not delusion, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah, because he's in his 60s when he's in prison, right? So yeah, I suppose there could be some sort of physical disease.
Well, he goes and he sees the doctor, and he like spectacularly fails all of the memory tests, and you had me confused at first because I was like, it is entirely possible that the writer was not intending for him to have a physical ailment, but that he has so slipped into delusion in order to cope with what is happening that it is him driving himself insane and not a physical ailment. But when I read it, I was like, this is entirely, he's got a literal sickness. You know, they're going to put him on the drugs and his brain is going to wither away because this is what he has. But now that y'all are, you know, talking about it, and I'm like, did I read that right?
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily wrong either. Like, I feel like both could be true. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a classic like both and situation where it's like that could also be true, but also like even if it is like a physical decay, the outcome is the same, right? Like the point of it is like the through like how he feels and how he thinks, and the material conditions of what make that happen is he's in prison, comma, maybe he's just old. You know, like it's both. You know what I mean?
Well, the why has been bugging me for a whole lot of these characters / subplots. Like, for assuming he has Alzheimer's, how does that tie in to the rest of his arc or the rest of the story in a meaningful way? The same thing with how Leon is brought back in at the end of it, and there's probably several more examples that don't seem to tie together with the first half of the book. except if this was not a medical issue and he really is causing himself like self-harm, then it would tie in to the theme of drug addiction that is woven throughout the entire book. So then this would fit perfectly. But that was not, it didn't jump out like that's obviously what they were trying to do, you know? So the whole thing with Al-Qaeda being sick, I was like, this, like, it was beautiful. It drew me in. I loved the imagery and all this stuff. But then at the same time, I was like, broader picture, I don't get why this is here. I don't understand what this is supposed to be telling me. And it was the same thing with Leon, Leon Prevant, when he's doing all of this stuff and trying to figure out what happened to Vincent. And I'm like, I love it. I don't get it. How does it tie into the broader picture?
Yeah, I think that's like overwhelmingly my feeling about a lot of the stuff in this book. It doesn't. I could do the work to be like, okay, well, if you think about the way that this book thinks about memory as like a device that collapses time and space, then you could think about Jonathan's delusions as like part of that, and like similar to the way that Vincent experiences like the way that, you know, she sees pieces of her life toward the end, and then the way that like Leon finds himself in like a different country as he thinks of it. Like, I think you could do the work to make it make sense, but it's more interesting to me that it doesn't cohere particularly neatly. I do think the next little section you get is I'll just give you this little passage from 144, and then we can maybe talk in big strokes about the Counterlife, because it's really about 150. He thinks of Robert sometimes when he steps into the yard. What's striking about the yard is its terminal blandness. Green grass crisscrossed with cement pathways. The pathways designed for inmates to walk as efficiently as possible between buildings during periods of movement. There's a separate recreation yard with a jogging track. Its aesthetics equally impoverished. Everyone is dressed in khaki and grey except the guards, who wear navy blue and black. The buildings are beige with blue accents. Outside the fence, there's a distant tree line. All of the trees the exact same shade as the grass. There just aren't enough colors here. That's his first impression. It's incomprehensible that this place exists in the same world as, say, Manhattan. So when he's crossing the yard, he sometimes pretends he's on an alien planet. That's where it starts, right? Like that's sort of like the foundational principle of where he starts to think of all of these characters at some point in their life begin to think of a place or a moment as like a country, and like a place that you travel to, right? Some distant place that reflects what's outside and is inside reflected by what's outside, right? We talked a lot about heterotopias. A prison is a fantastic example of a heterotopia. I think that, you know, I guess I'm interested, rather than the mechanism of the Counterlife, what do you guys make of his sort of, his imagination here? You know, he sort of imagines fleeing to Dubai, and he has this like really intricate kind of Vince Gilligan style, like, you know, procedural, here is how I would escape the country moment. Yeah, what do you guys make of this sort of, like, it's quite detailed. It's like, you know, he has this like this real, you know, it's not fanciful. It's quite grounded. His sort of pretend that here's how I would escape.
Yeah, well, it's all in an effort to make it more real for him, I think. Like, and I also, by the way, I love the bit where he's talking about he has this plan to hitch a ride with the window washers, and then later on he's like, wait, why would I even need to do that? Like, I could just like walk out normally like I do. And, like, I was thinking that as I was reading that window washer bit, I was like, this is very excessive. Yeah, but I think it's just like, because I don't know, you're just in prison, you're bored, you have all the time in the world, and this is what, and I think this is another part that indicates that he wants to entertain delusion in order for, you know, as a coping mechanism. He wants to create this like fairly like robust for him reality in his mind, and that includes a Vince Gilligan-esque detailed process of how he would have escaped and what his life would be like if he was not in prison.
I think that's pretty, like, that's a normal human experience, that when you're unhappy in the present, you daydream about doing something different in the past that would have put you in a different spot in the present. Or if you're unhappy in the present, you'll daydream about, I'm going to walk out the door and meet someone at the grocery store and we're going to do this whole adventure. And, so the whole daydreaming stuff just hit really closely with being unhappy with your current situation, for me.
And with Paul as well, where Paul is like doing these sort of elaborate mental equations throughout the book to like make himself feel better about how much of a shitty person he is. Like just constantly recontextualizing every decision to be like, oh, well, like it's not actually that bad. But yeah, the section I really love is where he goes where is it? The night he goes with Vincent to the holiday party, and when they leave together, they both return to the pied-à-terre. He kisses her goodnight as if everything were perfectly normal, revealing nothing of his plans. He stays up when she goes to sleep, drinks some coffee, and makes his preparations. Stares out at the dark ocean of Central Park and the lights beyond, memorizing a view that he'll never see again. He waits through the night for the window washers, who rise up the sheer wall of the tower on their suspended platform at dawn. It's early morning, first light over the park, and they don't recognize him. Why would they? Over the course of the night, he's given himself a buzz cut. He's wearing dark glasses and a baseball hat, and crucially, he's dressed all in white, just like them, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. He opens the window and speaks with them. Could I get a ride down to the street? He asks. They refuse at first naturally, but he has $5,000 in cash in the pied-à-terre, and he gives it all to them. Throws in 2 bottles of exquisite Grand Cru Classé from his favorite chateau in Bordeaux, and then Vincent's diamond bracelet and earrings. She's in the bedroom still asleep, and persuades them. He just wants a ride down to the street, that's all. It'll be over in a few minutes. No one will know. It's a lot of money, and the best wine they're ever going to drink. And then he just goes through this whole exercise of like, he goes out on the sidewalk, and no one looks at him any different, and then he flies to Dubai in first class, and it's just this like really elaborate, obscene, ridiculous plan. That, as you say, Pat, later on, he's like, yeah, I didn't have to do that. I could have just walked out. That's really good.
I'm over here just like, be extra, bro. I
Yeah,
mean, that sounds like an awesome story.
He's doing doing cosplay. Yeah.
But you know what? That specific scene, what I loved that the author did is when Vincent is leaving the apartment, she goes through the exact same thought process. She's like, okay, there's $5,000 in the safe. I've got these jewels. I could take those. And I mean, that's expected. She got, like, the author got the facts right. She remembered this is the amount of cash. But just hearkening back to it and having both characters think about it, but then Al-Qaeda didn't do anything with it, but Vincent did. Like that, the way that those were both used, I guess maybe they were intentionally juxtaposed against each other. I loved that.
That is an interesting detail. That's he remembers exactly like the objects in the room at that point in time, which makes me have a thought, like harkening back to that little bit of characterization with Al-Qaeda, who's not a poet. Perhaps this delusion that he nurtures in prison, perhaps there's like the product of like a life where you didn't use your imagination that much, because like his world is money, is about like meeting people, shaking hands, and being attentive to conversations and trying to manipulate and play the room that you're currently in, kind of thing. And yeah, just the fact that he remembers like the all the objects in the room, and like I feel like going into letting yourself slip into a delusion in prison is like an inexperience with imagining or using your imagination and like sticking with it, having this prolonged sort of fantasy. and he has no way to like mediate that or like to know when to stop, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, it's the first time in his entire life that he's had to deal with this kind of magical thinking. So, yeah, like, you're right. He just has no tools to mediate this, prevent it from completely consuming his mind, right? Like, it gets to the point where there is that really great test later on, which I'm sure we'll get to, but, like, where he's, like, really proud of how well he's done, and you're reading it being like, this guy's fucking losing it. Like, that was so wrong. He got everything wrong, and he's like, yeah, man, like, I fucking killed it. You know, he's so far, you know, into the mental counterlife. But the other thing I would, how am I going to say this? The other thing I would say is that, and maybe we'll talk about this in some detail when we get to the end of this book. I also think that there's a question of like the nature of reality at the heart of this book. Darth mentioned it last time when he was talking about ghosts and the supernatural and stuff like that. And there are some things later that maybe undo one of the arguments I made last episode about it being purely figurative. And so the other thing you also have to keep in mind here is like, reading this book by itself, this is like an effective piece of like characterization and like you can read it multiple ways. But I also just do want to put the pin on the board of like, what's really happening here is still an outstanding question that you have at the end of this book, I think. Like, for the first time ever, I fundamentally agree with Darth that it's really unclear if this is hard sci-fi or if this is like something else entirely. If it's purely figurative and poetic, or if there's some underlying truth to be found here. And that's part of why I did that stupid bit with the envelopes, is because like I don't understand this book. You know what I mean? Like, I love it. I think it's like prosaically has some of the best imagery of any book I've ever read. But like, I just don't know that I get what it's doing. And I think that the Counterlife is a really good example of that, where I think that in order to satisfy this question, you would have to sit down with the entirety of Mandel's corpus and go, what is she thinking about with the nature of reality? Because even in The Singer's Gun, which I read this week, that has a couple of moments where like, there's a character in that book who insists that he sees his dead wife. And one of the other characters is like, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. And then the more time he spends with this character, the more he starts to believe that this guy is actually seeing his dead wife. And so I think her preoccupation with grief and imagination and hauntings is like a real thing. I just don't know what to make of the reality of this novel at times. Is all I would say.
It's interesting that Mendel's throwing that everywhere, because if you look at the astronauts as ghosts in Station 11, then it's like in everything that I've experienced with this author so far. One thing I wanted to point out, that first passage that you read, about how everything in prison was like gray and everything, and it wasn't anything like Manhattan. Do you realize how like backwards that is? Like, he's saying everything here is just these bland gray colors, there's no variety, and it's nothing like Manhattan, which is a city full of gray buildings and shiny windows and no color. So it's the same as what he's seeing in prison, but it's saying it's different, but it's not different. It's the same.
Well, he's on the ground floor in prison. Maybe he doesn't know how to articulate the change in perspective in terms of like elevation. You know, he just sees color and like, yeah.
Or his Manhattan living experience was like entirely different than what I'm picturing, and it wasn't just like skyscrapers. You know, maybe he was in.
Didn't he say that he was always staying right on Central Park?
Yeah.
Or like, and he was overlooking Central Park. So yeah, it's quite a kind of a dynamic view a little bit.
Yeah, that's the I've never pronounced the word properly. Pied-à-terre.
Pied-à-terre.
Okay, you're gonna pronounce it every time for me. Um, I didn't know when to talk about that, so let's talk about it now. Did y'all have any notes on that?
What, specifically the pied-à-terre?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the hotel in Central Park?
Yeah, that's their apartment in Central Park. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I
Feels
didn't
like
think much about it.
Yeah, it feels like you're fishing for something. I don't have
Well,
anything specific.
I'm fishing to figure out if I'm right. I'm not trying to. For once, I'm not trying to like trick you into something.
Okay, we'll see.
Because I think that word is repeated so often, and it is at least over here. That's a very arcane word, and I'm like, why didn't they say apartment? Why didn't they do any of the other words that would make sense? And it kept being repeated, and then also it was like it's also a physical place that they go that repositions them for other parts of their character arcs. So, and the direct translation is foot on the ground, and I'm like, is this supposed to be symbolic of every time they go there, they're repositioning themselves physically, foot on the ground, they're you know where I'm trying to go with this?
I do. I also just think this might be like a Darth doesn't live in a city thing though. Because like this is like pretty common. Like I think it's supposed to be. You're not wrong. Like I think you can definitely read it that way. There's two things I would say. Vincent is Canadian, so she thinks of it like this because French Canada has tons of French in it. Yeah, and New York is full of this. I mean, much more to a larger extent, the early 2000s before like Airbnb and stuff, where you have tons of apartments that are just empty half the year because the people that live in them are, commuting out to the suburbs where their family lives and staying there when they have like extra work hours and stuff like that. So I could see reading it like that, but it's also just an artifact of the time of when this book is set. Like this is a real artifact of that period, if you like. Especially for rich people on Wall Street. It's extremely common.
And again, I'm not really talking about I'm talking about the literal word and not the physical thing. Because like having the apartment makes absolute sense, but calling it the pied-à-terre,
Yeah, you got it right the first time.
and like do a search. How many times is that word said? Because you have the digital, right? Like, how many times is that word said? And it's said so many times that it popped out to me. I was like, they keep repeating this word. Why does it mean something? So that's been stuck in my brain ever since. That like, what is this like quote unquote foot on the ground place supposed to be symbolizing?
Yeah, I don't think it's supposed to be symbolizing anything. Is my answer. I think it's
I kind of just think that's what it's called.
You also don't know what the book is about. So
that's true. That's true. Hey, if you know what the pied-à-terre symbolizes, let us know in the comments. Or you can DM me on Patreon. Apparently people love doing that.
Just the thing rich people do. They just call things by their, hard to pronounce names. I remember in Station 11, there was like, in one of the dinner parties, one of the girls was calling Prague Praha. And like
that's right.
It's just what rich people do. Like
I should also point out, because someone's going to make this comment, it is a legal definition in New York as well. Like it is legally, like to the point where they were looking at introducing a tax on it in 2014. So there is also a legal distinction in like the nature of the dwelling. But anyway, Garth, you go.
Gotcha. But yeah, the last note I had was before you read your first section there, I had literally underlined the last sentence prior to that, which was a topic that kept coming up, which was Al-Qaeda's being terrified of the hospital that's like attached to / takes care of the prison, because it's the place where old men disappear. And I loved like that phrase popped up several times, and every single time it just hit me so hard that it's like he's not afraid of dying. It's like maybe he sees like losing his mind coming or something. Like most people I assume, wouldn't be afraid of going into the hospital and disappearing forever. Most people think, oh, the hospital will fix me and I'll come out of the hospital. But the way that this keeps, every time that he mentions it, it's like, if I go there, I die.
Mm-hmm. Do you just think that that's because, like, it's prison healthcare? Like, it's that... Because I also think that's part of it, too, is, like, it's... that there's one... it's this idea that, like, there's one way out of this situation he's in. And it's death, you know? Like, there's no other way he's getting out of this. He's, you know...
Yeah, and it specifically says old men, so maybe the inference there is that everyone, when they get old enough, they just have to go to the hospital and they're hooked up to tubes until they die because everyone there is a lifer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty horrifying to have this looming over you the whole time. And I like that there's a really cool reversal that the book does where you know, we get the that great break in form where it's Jonathan's daughter listening to the charges being read, and it's like you get like a break in of like it's a court transcript of just like the number of charges that he's found guilty for, and it's like 172 years or whatever. For anyone that like likes this kind of experimental like breaking form stuff, Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter is like the book that does this. But yeah, and I love that he initially is like, yeah, I really fucked up. Like that was, you know, I finally got what's coming to me. And then as the book goes on, he's like, yeah, but you know, I did what I had to do. And if anything, you know, they got rich from it. If anything, I'm the real victim here. Like he slowly talks himself into feeling like he's the one that's been put upon by all of this. Yeah, it's really fucked up. It's like, as his reality dissolves, he's like, yeah, like maybe I'm not maybe everyone else is the problem. Like it was the system put me here. You know?
I did have a thought about this the other day, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I don't know. It was just something about how like people like you blaming yourself is like kind of like the last thing you would do if you had no other like recourse or like someone to blame. And like it's oh yeah, like Jonathan, yeah, like throughout the book, like we see that Jonathan he isn't a cruel person, you know, he doesn't necessarily like hurt anyone physically or like, you know, and therefore like that's, you know, reasonably like what he thinks of himself is that like he's not a bad person, and therefore when he's in prison, you know, like you know, like objectively facing the consequences of his crimes and stuff like that, it's hard for him to square that with what he thinks of himself. He's not a bad person, and therefore I think his mind sort of instinctively goes in those little pathways of like, if I'm not a bad person and I'm you know, being punished for the rest of my life, then, you know, like it's unfair, and you know, what about all these other people that were participating in me and no one got hurt, and you know, it's like these are all like, these thoughts all take priority over like the acknowledgement that like he is a bad person and he did bad things and he hurt a lot of people, and like, and you know, like, oh, that person didn't kill themselves, or like it's not my fault that person killed themselves, you know, like if, you know, if I was as bad as people say, then you know that person is responsible for their own death, and you know, it's just, yeah, that's, I think his at the time when he gets arrested, because he's free, his conscience magnifies, you know, the prospect of going to prison and the idea that he did something wrong. But like now that he's been in prison for a long time, I think he has trouble reconciling his own nature, the fact that he's doesn't think he's a bad person, and but with, you know, he's not necessarily cruel or anything, but like, yeah.
Okay, so devil's advocate here. He did not set out, the way that he was running this scheme was not intentionally hurting anyone. As long as he kept getting new investors, the old ones would get paid. It's not like he was, trying to get this investor and thinking to himself, I am going to bankrupt this person. He never overtly did anything cruel to argue that he was doing bad person, bad guy stuff. This was like just law breaking, like morality aside. He went to jail for law stuff. Yes, people lost their, they lost their savings, all that terrible, terrible. He didn't set out to do that. Yeah, that's where it led. But I could also see the argument that's like, I'm not a bad person. I didn't set out to hurt anyone. It accidentally got there. I should have done more to fix it, But that's way different than I did this intentionally, like, the scammers who were, bankrupting grandma. Like, he's not that level.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you also have to take this in the context of when it's set. This is obviously, a cribbing off of like Bernie Madoff and that kind of thing, but like, yes, but also like a Ponzi scheme, like a pyramid scheme is just a scam. Like, and it's that myth of civility that the executive cast convince themselves of, where it's like, well, I didn't do anything violent. I didn't, like you're saying, Darth, I didn't overtly set out to hurt anyone. It doesn't mean that your actions didn't destroy people's lives. Like, this is the same type of nonsense where like a CEO goes, well, I had to make layoffs. Like, what choice did I have? While they collect like a $600K paycheck and get, paid out millions and millions of dollars at the end of each financial year. Like, these people will actively destroy people's lives. And with exactly what you're saying, Darth, make that argument to themselves of like, when it set out to hurt anyone, it was, but the thing with the Ponzi scheme is it's like any pyramid scheme. There always has to be a bigger sucker. And at some point there won't be, right? Like at some point there won't be someone who's willing to pay $6 for your crypto when you paid $3. There won't be a next company who's willing to cover the losses of your stupid AI company, because at some point the money runs out. Like, these pyramid schemes all have the same problem, which is if you have to sell it to someone else for the thing to have value, it has no value, right? And I think that there's like and it's really peppered throughout Mandel's work, and we've already touched on it, but like, I increasingly think that she's more of a Baudrillard fan than I am. I talked about this last time. But like, her critique of capitalism is pretty poignant in a character like Jonathan, where, yeah, he has that myth of civility so baked into him. It's like these right-wing thugs in America who are like literally like getting people killed every day. They're taking away people's food. They're starving them to death, disappearing them from the street. And they go, yeah, but it's the violent left, because the left raise their voices because they're frustrated that their neighbors are being executed and tortured and disappeared. And it's like, civility does not mean what they think it means. And I know that, Darth, you agree with me, but I just wanted to like square the circle on why that argument to me is insufficient, if that makes sense. Like, I completely agree that Jonathan thinks that.
Well, yeah, I was debating how far to keep going, but we should roll.
Mm-hmm.
The only other thing to mention, I think, important in the prison is that he sees his like first ghost in there.
Yeah. Hey, are these real ghosts? You know what I mean? Okay. All right. If you say so.
I think it's explained by what you said at the beginning. It's memory collapsing time and space. That's how I take it.
I want to argue that Vincent at the end is real, and then the rest of them are imaginary.
Okay, maybe we'll come back to it when we talk about the end then. Yeah, because I don't know what the fuck is happening there. Okay. The next big thing we have is that Vincent joins a ship. This is notable for a number of reasons. Her mother drowns in the ocean. Seems like she really shouldn't want to be on a boat, but she does. And obviously we know that the book opens with her drowning. And, you know, the way that I read this is like her sort of taking ownership of this like fundamental trauma that she has in some ways. And here she meets Belle, and I thought this was like a really poignant, I'm not sure if you had this as well, Darth, but I've got this on 160 in the EPUB, like this sort of this sensation of meeting someone and just instantly knowing that you're going to be in love with them. Do you want to read the? I got it from like the room was more or less what Vincent had expected.
I don't know if we underlined the same part, but she'd never believed in love at first sight, but she did believe in recognition at first sight. She believed in understanding upon meeting someone for the first time that they were going to be an important part of her life. And I loved that. I loved that.
It's so good. A sensation like recognizing a familiar face in an old photograph. In a sea of faces that mean nothing. That mean nothing. One comes into focus. You. It's so good. Come on, man. Sometimes you read a passage and you're like, that's the realest shit I've ever heard. And she has a real knack for like this book is filled, and all of her books are filled with these little just epigrams of like, she's really thought hard about some like the quintessence of the human experience. She's really thought hard about like one particular feeling, and she works really hard to nail that feeling and to like expand it just enough. You know, it's not overwritten. It's not like 10 paragraphs of like describing how much she thinks that this guy's hot or whatever, or like destined or whatever. Like it's just enough. Yeah, I had the exact same sentence.
I think it's interesting to consider how often in real life we probably all have those moments, but then we're either like too embarrassed or too shy, or like you can't go up to a stranger and be like, hey, I think we're supposed to like be best friends. You know? Like that's pretty hard to do, but sometimes you'll just like see someone and you're like you have that like feeling of connection that you can't explain, but also you can't just reach out and grab them because there's issues there.
Yep. Also, I like that your first thought was like, I must grab them so they can't flee. Hold still, sir. Did you know you're my next best friend? It's like, all right, okay.
Yeah, all my guy friends, we were always doing like karate and stuff. It was always like very like grab and go, so that's why I defaulted to like punching and stuff.
Grab and go. This will surprise no one, but me and Patrick are indoors people, so we don't really do a lot of, you know, wrestle and tassel type stuff. You know what I mean?
Not after
no archery in the
threw that
backyard.
window.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. We just weren't those kids, man. I don't know what to tell you. So the other day, someone was like, "Oh, did you and Alex like fight growing up?" And I was like, "Nope. We sat quietly and read books in different rooms."
Checks out.
This was my childhood. And then later, we sat quietly and played Game Boy in different rooms. Listeners, if you're watching this in the comments, let us know. What type of kid were you? Were you a wrestle tassel? Were you doing a bit of horseplay, or were you an indoors person? You know, I feel like there's I should put out a YouTube poll. Are you what type of person are you? Indoors or wrestle tassel?
Like a cat.
Like a cat, yeah.
You an indoors or outdoors person?
Yeah. Are you an indoor person or an outdoor person? That's good.
So the next note that I had was when she and Joffrey are talking about stuff. Did y'all have anything prior to that?
This might be just after it, but this is 165 on my EPUB. And it's another of those little moments where, and it's really just something that I wanted to read because I think it's like great. It's where she realizes that she doesn't just look different; she looks old. Because I'm sure that we've all had these moments. She says, she thought her face looked strange without it. This is talking about makeup. But now, on this particular morning, with her pretend husband either on the verge of arrest or in police custody, there was some appeal in the thought of not looking like herself. Vincent studied her face in the mirror while she drank her coffee. She saw that at some point in the near past, she had slipped over a border into the era of her life where she was tired. When she was tired, she looked not just tired, but slightly older. She was almost 28 years old. And yeah, there's a real threshold where like, yeah, when you're tired, you don't just look tired, you look older. And this is one of those like, oof, I'd never thought about this before type passages. It's a bit rude, honestly. I don't know if she should be allowed to do that in a book. Bit too real for me.
Yeah, I was sitting over here like calmly cursing the character out. Like the 28-year-old thinks she's old.
Yeah, rude. Rude. Yeah, come to me in 20 years when your back's fucked, love. Like, come on. Yeah, what did you have with Jeffrey and Vincent Darth?
So this is after they've kind of started a relationship, and they're sitting in one of their rooms and like folding swans or whatever, and they start talking about some story about how they were fishing for birds, and someone in some book or something, like they were out on a boat and they had their fishing lines and they were throwing out and trying to get those like seagulls or whatever that were up in the air to dive down and catch the food. And I loved that imagery so much. It really stuck in my brain. And then I was like, oh, that's James and the Giant Peach. That's why it sticks in my brain so much. And I don't know how well y'all know that movie at all, but they in order to the giant peach is like out in the ocean, and in order to get it to fly, they rope all of these seagulls and lift the peach up by having the seagulls. And I was like, that's the imagery that I'm thinking of related to here. So that was just a kind of weird side note.
Okay.
And then
I'm
right
looking at
below
it.
that is
This is a
also
weird image. I'm with you. Oh, it's just a big old peach. Okay. I've never seen this
so
film.
James and the Giant Peach that's not that's not popular over down under, huh?
Maybe it didn't make its way over, no. Interesting.
Hmm.
I've read the
Yeah,
book. I for sure read the book
Eric
as a kid.
adored it. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, Eric adored it, so we watched it many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's firmly stuck in my craw.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Can we pause for one quick second? My cat just threw up all over my carpet.
Yeah, go. This post-apocalypse unit is sponsored by the Maynard Trigg series. You can find these books at underink.press. They are my science fantasy coming-of-age novels. If you like post-apocalypse fiction, I guarantee you'll like these novels. They take place in a dying world far above the earth in the skies. They are fantasy novels. They are mystery novels. They are coming-of-age. If you enjoy the things we talk about and the way we talk about them, I guarantee you'll like these novels. Use code REVIEW10 at checkout. That's REVIEW10 at checkout for 10% off the original hardback of the first novel. That's this one right here. Once again, REVIEW10 at underink.press to grab your copy of the first Maynard Trigg book today.
Pick up real quick, right after that bit about the catching the birds. Right after that is when they talk about how his dad wanted to be a pilot and how depressing it was because he actually was a coal miner. That was some of the most, I loved, that was beautiful, just imagining him underground, covered in the coal dust, and just like, I want to be flying a plane. Just picturing that, and he's in the exact opposite spot. It was beautiful.
Yeah. It's a really potent tragedy.
Well, that's the thing. I liked how Jeffrey sees it that way, right? Because that makes sense to him, like from like a narrative perspective. Stories, right? Like, oh, you want to be a pilot, you want to be soaring high in the sky. Oh, but and then you're underground actually, and oh, isn't that soul crushing? But like, does he know? Like, I don't know. I reckon you could find a different kind of like fulfillment. I don't know, like, and as your circumstances change, like you shift your interests and your priorities and stuff, like, and you adapt. I don't think it was necessarily a tragedy, but I think it's interesting that Jeffrey has that idea, and that is what his motivation for being.
Well, I think that also ties in with a whole lot of other stuff in this book, because Vincent was doing the same thing. Like, she wanted to be in love and have a family and be doing her own thing, but instead she was working in the mines, quote unquote, by getting married to Al-Qaeda. A lot of these characters were kind of like, I want this, but I'm doing this instead.
Well, that's why that scene is so, like, and when I read it this time, it did emotionally affect me. Like, I was a little bit teary reading this scene this time, because that scene where she and Jeffrey are hanging the swans, it's such a relief to find this character happy, because she's gone through so much, and this moment of, like, just, even if it's temporary, and we know something bad's going to happen to her, there's like a cosmic relief in her no longer having to live a lie or live a counter life or compromise. Like, she's just happy in this moment. And I think Mandel really earns allowing Vincent to be happy because of how thorough, that sort of the constant mediation of, like, oh, well, I wanted this, but I ended up here, or I slid into this life instead of this life, or like with Jonathan, where he's like, yeah, I slipped once, and I cheated once, and cheating necessitates cheating again, like all of these things. It's quite affecting. That whole passage with Jeffrey. It might be my favorite part of the book, I think. Then I think the next thing I've got is on a similar note. When this is like earlier, so like between the two events chronologically, Vincent's bartending, and Mirella comes into the bar. Mirella was, for those who don't remember from last episode, she's like, she was Vincent's best friend during her time with Jonathan. And Mirella goes to the bar and just doesn't recognize her, or pretends not to recognize her. It's really unclear. I've got this on 169 in the EPUB. Vincent felt strangely outside of herself. She observed her hands as she poured mixed nuts and pretzels into little steel bowls. I dreamed you came into my bar and didn't know me. She set the bowls gently on the bar before her former best friend, who said thanks without looking at Vincent, and returned to her conversation. Blah, 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 blah. And then it goes on and on. And then Vincent takes off her glasses and then faces Mirella just in case. And then Mirella just doesn't recognize her at all. Was it possible that she was actually unrecognizable to someone who'd once been her dearest friend? A more likely possibility was that this was Mirella's revenge, pretending not to know Vincent. Or perhaps she was playing the game Vincent was, living in disguise, except that Mirella's disguise was more comprehensive and included pointedly not recognizing anyone from her previous life. Or alternatively, possibly Vincent was losing her mind, and maybe none of her memories were real. It's that sense of, like, disreality. Of, I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience of, like, running into someone who you know so clearly, and they just don't know you at all. It is quite a bizarre, like, you start to question everything that you have about the context of that person. I had this, like, a couple of months ago, just after I got back from Europe, and it was, like, the first time I was healthy again. And I've been so unwell for, like, a month and a half. And I was walking to get on the bus to go to work, and I, like, looked up from, like, I don't know what I was doing. I was probably, like, changing what I was listening to. And I looked up, and I was walking beside this person who I went to university with. And I looked at her, and I was like, oh, this is blah, blah, blah in my head. And, like, it immediately clicked into place. And she looked at me and then just walked away like she didn't know me at all. And it was such a weird moment. I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe I don't know that person. And then I went and looked them up on LinkedIn. I was like, no, I absolutely know that person. I worked on, like, 3 projects with them for, like, across 2 years. And they just, like, completely didn't, just nothing. And it really does make you question, like, am I misremembering how well I knew this person? And I just love how it captures that. It's probably the beard, yeah. But still.
Well, the problem is we don't know the context of the ignorer. Or we don't know the mindset of the ignorer. I mean, specifically here in the book, we don't ever see, like, normally an author would use something like a flicker of recognition sparked in her eyes, but then she quickly glanced away. That's normally what you would have here, but there's none of that. There is nothing here that indicates that she recognized Vincent whatsoever. I don't think that she did. I don't think she was pretending at all, unless it was like Vincent said, that she had like rewritten her own identity so deeply that she couldn't recognize Vincent. But the point I was getting to was that I've had that experience myself where I didn't recognize people. What's even weirder, it was the choir director and his wife who played the piano, and they were walking towards me, and I said hi to the wife and didn't recognize him and didn't say a thing to him. And then 5 steps later, 5 steps, and I was like, oh crap, that was him. So like without that context of what is going on in their brain, like we can't just assume, that they were intentionally ignoring someone, because our brains are so stupid sometimes, and just the right synapse won't fire even when like a couple is right there in front of you. That I've recognized one and did not recognize the other one. So anyway.
Yeah, she might be like me and just has major face blindness.
Mm-hmm.
I've also done that too. I remember a couple years ago, I saw someone in the valley. They're like, "Oh, hey Pat, how you going, man?" I was like, "Who? Who are you?" And like, and they were like so familiar with me, and they were genuinely asking like how I was going and stuff, and like I was friendly enough to them, and then the next day I'm like, "Oh, that was this person from high school."
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is a location recognition as well. Like that's really deeply ingrained in humans, where if you always see your waitress at Waffle House and then you see them somewhere else, like you instantly would recognize their face if you had that this is the Waffle House person, but because they're not in the context that you normally associate them with, you just don't recognize them at all. I've seen that with especially with little kids who are still developing. Like if you always see them at like the nursery or at church or whatever, you always see them in one place, they see you somewhere else. I remember there was one story where the kid saw their teacher at the grocery store or something, and they said, "Why aren't you at school?" Like the kid thought the teacher literally lived at school in the classroom, because that's where they associated their identity.
Huh. This might explain a lot about my life, because growing up, my mom was a teacher, and so I saw a lot of teachers outside of school, largely on the balcony drinking wine. And so my brain has always been wired to like, sort of, like, necessarily, I've never had that experience of like only remembering people in one context, because basically from when I can remember stuff, that wasn't the case. So I wonder if that's why I'm really good with faces, is that like, I just grew up in such a porous relationship with those normal structures of like context. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
I could see maybe you met an abnormal number of people, and constantly being introduced to new people, especially if your mom was like, "This is my good friend," or if she made it sound really important, then you're like, "Oh, I got to remember who this person is because it's important to my mom,"
With that, and like also
so-
you're like, that's also Mrs. Blah blah from school. Like it's a weird, like one of our really close friends, he taught me maths, and there was this transition point where it went from that's like, the teacher, to oh no, that's just like a guy that I know. Like there's something quite strange about that, especially I think because it's a lot of my relationships with those authority figures started that way. And so it meant that like, and it maybe speaks to like my lifelong issue with authority. It means that when people try to tell me what to do, I'm like, I'm not wired to function like that. Like everything should be collaborative. Yeah. Okay. Well, setting this mind to therapy session aside.
Well, I think the book has a couple things like that, like unknowable things, and that's one of them. Where did Mirella recognize Vincent? And then obviously there's like, oh wait, no, actually I was gonna say it's unclear, it's unresolved if Jeffrey did kill Vincent, but we know that he didn't. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. But no, it is full of unknowable things. But also the fact that he didn't kill her is unknowable to everybody else, right? Like it's this sort of
yeah, it's true.
It's that theme we talked about last time of like the glass hotel itself, of like it's like you look in from the outside and it's like perfect and it's clear, but then you're looking out from the inside and you're seeing something completely different. And there are these like invisible barriers that we permeate and move through. And yeah, I just love the way that like the book insists on breaking those barriers down. Especially I like the way that that to that theme, Pat, Jonathan's talking about like when he's like fully developing the idea of the counterlife. He goes, that's memory, not the counterlife. Vincent isn't in the counterlife. He feels it's important to keep the two separate, memory versus counterlife, but he's finding the separation increasingly difficult. It's a permeable border. In memory, the air conditioning was so aggressive that she had trouble keeping warm, which is why she was always in the hot tub, whereas in the counterlife, she's not there at all. In the counterlife, he turns away from the view of McMansions and leaves the room, walks out into the wide corridor with its elaborately patterned strip of carpeting, into the elevator made of dark mirrored surfaces, which opens unexpectedly into the lobby of the Hotel Cayette, where Vincent sits with Walter, the night manager, on leather armchairs. This is a memory. They came back here a year before he was arrested. He woke up alone in the bed, he remembers. He woke at 5 a.m. and went looking for her, found her here in the lobby with Walter. The memory stays with him, because when she looked up, her mask slipped just a little, and for a flash he saw something like disappointment on her face. She wasn't happy to see him. But here, memory and the counterlife diverge, because while in real life he got involved in one of those painfully superficial conversations about jet lag, in the counterlife his gaze has shifted to the window, where outside it seems much too bright for 5 in the morning in British Columbia. A different quality of sunlight altogether, because once again he's in Dubai, on the Palm Tree Island, looking out at a house across the narrow bay, and now the lobby is empty. Again, looking out, looking in, shifting perspectives, porousness. Yeah. Really, really cool stuff. And like that sort of flicker of... It's almost like reality has like these like weird glitches from certain people's perspectives, or their subjectivity. Yeah.
I keep getting unnerved that we have highlighted the same parts of this book. That section was what I had highlighted, saying that this was so visual that I...
Yeah. Well, and I love that Station 11's like the show's full of shots like that too.
Yeah, and it's because I just came off of Station 11. As I was reading this book, I was like, this is really seems very conducive to a TV adaptation, I think. But at the same time, like, a lot of it is inner monologue and prose and like stuff that you wouldn't be able to communicate in TV. And then I was wondering, like, I wonder if Station 11 is the same? Like, I wonder if, yeah, it must be, like...
Yeah.
And then I was sort of thinking about, like, how would you adapt a Glass Hotel in the same manner that Station 11 was probably adapted? Yeah.
Well, because that was the original plan, is that Somerville was going to do all 3 books as limited miniseries. I don't know why that fell apart. I imagine because this book would be impossible to adapt. But I thought that about Station 11 too, and that adaptation is brilliant, so I don't know.
If they did the whole thing as they'd have to do it as like a possible time travel / possible ghost, and like really lean into that from that perspective, because then the general audience would be into it, as opposed to what it is a lot more niche.
Well, this is a good segue to talk about the ghost stuff, because maybe, or or maybe there really are ghosts. Maybe there really is time travel. We don't. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, this gets addressed where I think it's Al-Qaeda's in his cell, and he's talking to Hazleton about ghosts, and Hazleton's like, I don't know, I always wanted to believe in them. And then you get the section where he's here it is. So he goes, what he doesn't tell Hazleton is that Faisal is standing in a corner of the cell. Al-Qaeda has been trying to convince himself that he's hallucinating. Faisal cannot possibly be in this room, because A, it's a prison cell, and B, Faisal is dead. Nonetheless, Faisal looks alarmingly real. He's wearing his favorite gold velvet slippers. He's standing under the cell window, craning his neck to look at the moon. And then, a little more dialogue. Faisal flickers slightly, like a faulty hologram, and then blinks out. So, I mean,
Was that the second ghost we've seen, or was it like the third? Because Paul was seeing the ghost of the kid that he got killed.
it might be the.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I think it might be the first. After that, yeah.
I don't remember when it happened, but when Vincent was shopping, at some point she says she saw her dead mom. I don't know if it was after this section.
Yeah, it's right toward the end.
I mean, I've seen ghosts. Like, I remember this one time I was, where was it? Yeah, I was at my friend's place, and I remember this is an exception in my life, like, because it was really, really vivid. But like, I just distinctly remember someone standing over me, and like, I knew exactly who it was, and like, I could see like their face and their features and stuff. And then I reach up and try and like touch them because they're standing over me. I'm like, what are you doing? And then my hand just like passes through them. Yeah.
Weird.
So
Okay.
I'm like, I relate, Jonathan.
Brains are weird, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we can talk about it at the end, but I'm just not. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, I just want to put a pin in like the question of reality, and that this book is not solvable, I guess, is the thing that I would say. And I think it's productive to think about what that means, that you can't discern whether these ghosts are real or not. And like, if I was to put together like I thought about doing this as well. I think we should do this for the stuff that we cover. Putting together like a study guide, like if you were going to give this book to like a book club, you know, like a list of things to maybe consider talking about. One of them is definitely the nature of reality, and whether we think that these ghosts are real or not, and if they are, what that means, and if they're not, what that means. Because it's like it's an unsolvable question in this book specifically. Potentially answers to come.
Yeah. Related is, this is not like specifically ghosts, but it's definitely supernatural, is before Vincent goes to the party with Jonathan, she is going down and attempting to get on the subway to be traveling towards the party, and suddenly she has a vision that if she goes down into the subway, she will die definitively. And I took, considering the rest of it, I took that as fact, and she writes it off as a panic attack, that she doesn't know why the panic attack happened. But considering the rest of the book, I'm thinking that this is a literal premonition, and assuming that's the case, what is the point of it? Because it doesn't seem to tie in with anything else, and it's like something that a filmmaker would put in just to keep the audience interested right before a commercial happens. Like, I don't get what the point of it's like really dramatic. And she's like, I almost died. I cannot go in the subway. I cannot go down in that subway again, or I will die. And then the book just ignores it from then on out. The only thing I've been able to come up with is that you could equate going under the concrete, meaning going down under this, down into the subway, as going underwater, and maybe this is like foreshadowing her death by drowning. But that's the only guess that I've had.
That one is that like that's a relatable thing as well. Sometimes you just get feelings and you just like, I can't go down that street, or I can't whatever, get in this Uber, or and I have to take the long way around of whatever it is you're doing, in a literal or figurative sense. I totally get that. I always thought that was just like my tism, but I imagine that's a relatable experience for a lot of people as well. But the second thing is, I'm wondering, like, is there, I mean, because this book is set in history, is there like, was there some historical thing that happened? Like, was there an attack in a New York subway in that year or something like that?
Not in New York, but there was the London bombings, which went soon after this. Which do make an appearance in some of Mandel's other work. Yeah, but I think this book is full of characters realizing they're feeling something and then absolutely believing it completely. Like, that's kind of like and like whether you call them premonitions or not is like, I guess, your flavor's going to vary, but yeah, these characters, like you say, Pat, they just have these complete, like, they go, I know this thing to be true, I just have this true feeling about this thing, and it's completely unsupportable. Paul has many of those throughout his, when we're through his perspective.
Sorry, I missed a really important sentence. My mother's waiting for me in the subway.
There you go.
I should ask my mother, she thought, and the equally irrational thought that followed was, my mother's waiting for me in the subway.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, we know that when she dies, she returns to her mother, right? So, like,
But her mom was waiting at the lake where she died. So this is kind of harkening back to what I had said before, that there's a lot of these moments that just don't make sense in the overall context, and I would love if they had been melded together, because like so many of the characters are melded together from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, but then a lot of these moments or bigger pictures, like Leon and Al-Qaeda being sick or going crazy or whatever, a lot of it doesn't mesh together, unless the point is supposed to be that life doesn't always mesh together, which whatever.
Yeah, welcome to my whole experience with this book. I still don't know what it's about. Okay, the next big thing I have is Paul becoming a musician, and then the Leon stuff. Do you guys have anything before that?
Oh, also, and like, chapter like 14, like, well, like at the end of the book, I realized that some chapters had the date on them, and I was just trying to get the time and the date through the context in the chapters. And I realized, wait, hold on, some of these chapters literally tell you when it is.
Yeah, how do you think in the summary I knew what year everything happened in?
Yeah, I'm unobservant.
Especially how it jumps around in time a lot. That usually I wouldn't clock that either, but then I realized, oh wait, she's trying to keep the reader in line of what era we're in, because it is jumping in time so much. I think the Paul stuff is right after this, where they're getting the shredders and starting to shred the evidence.
But,
yeah, this is
Oscar and his whole vibe.
Okay, this is just like a stupid thing that only I would ever notice. But the receptionist Simone and Al-Qaeda walk to the store and buy 4 shredders, and then carry them back to the store, or back to where they work, and I'm picturing like the size of the boxes, and they're walking. I don't know, the whole imagery with like these billionaire dude. Granted, it's maybe fake money, but still billionaire dude who like is walking and holding these huge old boxes that they might not even have been able to physically carry. And I'm like, I am the only one who's sitting here thinking about the measurements of the boxes that they're carrying.
I mean, they could be little shreds.
Well, yeah, that's where I was thinking as well. Like, I was like, this like a little, cylinder that like shreds the paper and just like instead of a big box that catches the paper and stuff like that. But who knows?
That's very Darth. I really like the scene before that though, where Vincent's having a weird day. This was like the scene that you just had there, Darth, where she's like, I don't know, if I go on the subway, I'm gonna die. She's like killing time before the party. And when she walks into the office, I don't know if you guys have ever had these moments, but when you walk into a room and you know that like there's something wrong and like really, really wrong, like existentially wrong. I love how tortured that feeling is. And the way that Vincent just like keeps her head up through this whole experience, I think is like such a cool writing choice and you get that a little bit later from Jonathan's perspective, where like when she, manages to stand up for herself in this moment and like take all of this quite maturely, he's like, yeah, like that's my girl. Like for all of the differences they've had and for all this performance, like she is a strong person and she's able to deal with this situation, even if she maybe, as the sequence goes on, she sort of detaches a bit from reality and dissociates a little. But yeah, it's such a good the experience of reading that really strongly conveys the experience of those situations. I think that and again, Mandel's is really good at this at a prose level, communicating a feeling that like just sticks in your brain and stays with you through like a whole page or a whole sequence. Yeah, I really like.
Well, I like I think Claire goes, "What? How do you know?" And then Vincent goes, "Because I'm not a fucking idiot." And like I was like,
yeah. She goes,
exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah. She's like, "I know what a Ponzi scheme is." She's like, "Huh?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm not stupid." Like,
I was gonna say it's really ironic the imagery that the trophy wife comes back from shopping and puts down her expensive bags of clothes that she bought specifically for the party, like to wear one time. She bought these expensive clothes and she's carrying this bag of expensive clothes in to be told that they're broke.
yeah. Yep. It's so good. And the fact that she's like younger than Claire as well. Ugh, it's also yeah. Yeah. It's real like hey, how ugly can capitalism make you as a moment?
Claire, there is a line in there. When Al-Qaeda is picturing the Counterlife and how great everything is, and then that section ends with the sentence, "In the Counterlife, Claire wasn't the one who called the FBI." Y'all remember reading that? Because that doesn't mesh with everything else that we've read here. Like from everything else, Claire was not like the stool pigeon, right? Like if she was the one who called the FBI, she wouldn't have been there in the office with them, like freaking out because she was the informant who would be getting the deal. She wouldn't be talking with them. You know what I'm trying to say?
I remember that like Claire was more or less knew what was happening and that it was fraudulent, but she was trying to like get it revealed in a way that like wouldn't necessarily blow everything up, is what I remember. She was trying to gently nudge Jonathan to be like, to confess that it's a Ponzi scheme, but like she was like, she wasn't she didn't necessarily want a confrontation or like anything, is what I remember.
I don't know. I read that scene of them in the office. I read that as her confronting Jonathan about it and being like, to everyone, like to the people in the room, like, did you know about this? And then she reports it to the FBI. That was kind of my assumption.
Mm.
Oh.
Because she's sort of like, this can't possibly be true. I'll confront my dad and make sure that I've misunderstood something. And that's why when Vincent comes in and she's like, did you know about this? Vincent, of course, didn't, because Jonathan kept them so distant. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that makes way more sense, because in my brain with you talked about how weird it was that Al-Qaeda was making these like escape plans to sneak out and have a different identity and all this stuff when that wasn't needed. And like I think I had reframed the timeline so that like after the party the cops were already coming after them.
No, I think it's like the next day. Yeah, I read her as leaving the office and then making the call, basically. You've also got to remember that, like, Ella Kaspersky has been, like, building up evidence for years, so it's also possible that she was working with the FBI and that she's the one that tipped off Claire. You know, there's lots of ways that you could try and fit this all together.
Yeah, I kept forgetting what role Ella Kaspersky has with everyone who's not Jonathan. Like, I can never remember, like, if she interacted with Leon, Prevant, or the his other weird investors or whatever, or Claire.
And I think that the way that she like when she pays Paul to write that threat, I think that it's part of this complete picture of her life of like someone who turned all of her attention and time into like trying to undo this guy and try to like hold him accountable. And ultimately, like the FBI were just bad at their jobs. They didn't do a good job. They didn't follow through on this. And yeah, I think it gets to the point where it takes someone like Claire who has evidence to turn him in for it to actually stick. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it.
Well, I think at that point, Claire turning them in was kind of irrelevant because the fund was insolvent, so there were going to be hundreds of investors going to the cops at that point. So there was going to be all this evidence coming out, regardless of what Claire did.
Right, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Why were they going? Yeah, why were they going insolvent though? Like, I understand that the financial crisis was happening, but like they weren't actually investing in anything.
Yep. Let's pause there because I want to hit that hard. But what you just said about the writing the thing on the glass thing, it just hit me that how much that's related to Jonathan's first wife, because she was the one that says that to Kaspersky, right?
Yeah.
She picks up the broken shards of glass and puts it in Kaspersky's drink while they pass by her table at like a diner or something. And she had been going after Jonathan's business and trying to get the FBI and all this stuff, and his wife was like standing up for him or something, and she puts the glass in her cup and says, "Why don't you eat glass?" or whatever. And so when that's written on the hotel window, like it's really understated how it's reminding Jonathan of the woman that he loved so much that he never ever mentions her name or talks about her in the entire book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty fucking devastating. Like, I don't know, it's a pretty deep dagger to try and drive into this guy. And the irony of Paul fucking up the timing is incredible.
I was gonna say, does Jonathan actually see it or does he hear about it?
Maybe neither. I don't know.
Yeah, we never get any indication.
Yeah, because that is funny that he fucks up the timing.
What I kept hoping Mandel was going to do, which it's brazen for me to say that she should have done this, but with all of the time skipping, Go years into it's like 2007, and Vincent and Jonathan are just talking, and Vincent's like, "Hey, I never told you about this thing that happened back at the hotel when someone wrote this on the glass." And then she says it, and Jonathan goes white because he recognizes what that was, and then he realizes who said it, and he's reminded of his wife and all this stuff. Like that would have tied that part together with everything so beautifully, and it wasn't there.
Yep. Very much the story of this book is like there could have been a neat way to like gel that together, but it's not. And I think it gives the book a more complete sense of reality, because reality very rarely has those like there's no closure in real life.
And I think it's like kind of more poetic anyway that the people that affects the most are Paul and Ella, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Leon, Walter, right? For some reason, he's really affected by that.
Walter's such a weird character, man.
I love Walter.
Yeah, he's very yeah, he's got some like real Pat energy in him, I reckon.
He knows what he's about.
Yeah. And to answer the question, so basically the reason that they run out of money is that you need people to keep investing, to keep producing money, so you can keep paying out the previous people who gave you money. But there comes a certain point in every Ponzi scheme where, because of interest rates and because there's only so many people that you can scam, you're going to get to a point where the money that you owe people is greater than the money that you have coming in from new investors. And it's at that point that the fund can no longer provide the returns that it needs to provide, because it's only providing those returns. It's like, you've got to think of it as like, it's not that they have this giant pile of money from all these investments. The second money comes in, they're sending that money back out again to pay the previous people that put money in. And so it's like, it's running on like the razor thin margins, and Jonathan and his company are taking this isn't literally what it is, but like imagine these days it'd be like the transaction fees, like the cut off the top of doing the investment. That's how they're making money and getting paid, but that's all personal wealth that they're gathering. And the fund is just like, it's like $5 in, $5 out, $5 in, $5 out, until it's $3 in, $5 out, $2 in, $5, and suddenly you start to get into trouble. And obviously with the GFC, people aren't investing as much because they don't have any fucking money because the economy's collapsing. That's essentially how they run it.
Yeah, and I suppose that everyone wants to get their money out as well as the GFC is happening. So yeah,
what's exactly what happened in 2008, where you had all these people that had subprime mortgages going, hey, fuck this, I'm taking my money out, and the banks didn't have the equity in order to pay them out. It's exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Spoilers, 2008, 2009 was basically just American banks doing a Ponzi scheme. It's exactly the same concept. Yeah.
And I wish that they had run it differently. I actually wish that they had him being part of the housing crisis. Like he was doing the same kind of dirty stuff in order to make all of these extra 100% of profit that they were doing, so that when everything collapsed, it would give a much more, in my mind, legitimate reason for that firm collapsing. Because the way that this is structured makes so little sense to me. Because in like the investment world, you don't put in money that you intend to need. Like, you put in money for it to be there 20 years later or something. Like, if you put in something and then you pull it out a month later, now you have to pay capital gains on it. So the idea that this was structured in a way that people are constantly pulling money out it fits with like a bank account or something. It doesn't fit with the way that I understand investing in general. And the amount, we never get an actual like hard number, I don't think, of like how big their fund is, but I'm assuming it would have been like billions, considering how wealthy they talk about their clientele being, and the fact that he could buy this ornate hotel and like, you know, all of this stuff, right? And so like I'm sitting here and like thinking about if they had just put that money into SPY during this time period, they would have gotten 20%. If they had just gone long on Apple during this period, they would have been up 475%. Like, if they had invested any of this money instead of just putting it in like a bank account where it doesn't get anything, then they would have been able to pay off all of their investors. Like, the way that this is structured, it fails because they don't understand how to invest money. It doesn't fail because it's a Ponzi scheme. If they have enough money, then you can be successful just because you have so much money. And the most interesting quote there is from Charlie Munger, who was once the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And the quote is like along the lines of, the first 100 grand that you make is a beast, and it's the toughest that you'll ever have to work, and do whatever you need to do to get that 100 grand. And after that, everything becomes easier because that 100 grand compounds and it compounds and it compounds. And these people are taking in like $1 billion from Xavier, you know, however much money from these people. Like, they should have been able to be successful, especially with a whole the 18th floor. Like, that whole place was an investment firm doing actual proper investing. So the fact that this 17th floor doesn't work, I'm like, they were just bad money managers, which is, I mean, that's legit. That's, people don't know how to handle money. You could say, yes, that's perfectly fine for the story, but the story just makes it sound like it failed because it was a Ponzi scheme. And I think it just goes way deeper than that as to like why it actually failed when they had so much money that it makes it really hard to fail.
Well, I think the second you start a Ponzi scheme, you're already in debt, right? And so you have no money to invest, and you have money to invest, but you have no time to let it grow because you need to keep paying out the people who are expecting to get crazy returns on their investment.
Well,
So
yes,
it's
but
just
there's
like
a difference
snowball.
in most investors. They just want to see the return. They want to know, I made 15% last month. They're not going to take that
No,
out.
they want the money.
But no,
That's
if
exactly
they take
the
it
point of
out,
his scheme.
but no, if they take it out, then they have to pay. Short term is 60% tax. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So like the way that it, especially with taxes, you have to hold longer term. And of course, if you're talking like IRAs or whatever, that's totally different. But the way that they're talking about pulling money out, and every time that they move money, they're getting taxed on it. Every time they're making trades, they're getting taxed on it. So the way that they structured this, I just don't know how much sense it actually makes.
Right, but that's the appeal of this. That's the appeal of the scheme, right? Is it's the one fund where they go, we can guarantee a return every month. You get paid out this exact amount. Like, that's why it's an appealing lie, because it doesn't. In reality, it would make no sense, but because it's a Ponzi scheme, it's possible for it to feel like they talk about basically being paid out. It's like being paid a salary for doing nothing from this fund, right? Their dividends come in consistently every month. It's the same every month. And the way that they're doing that in a financial level is by backdating transactions to make losses look like they didn't happen. Because, money comes in a month later and they backdate it to make it look like they didn't take a loss. Like you're right that it doesn't make sense because it's a lie. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, this is based on, loosely, again, allegedly, I don't want to get in any legal trouble. This is based on the Bernie Madoff scam, which is very similar. Where it's exactly what you're saying, Darth, where everyone else who's an actual investor is saying, this is how it works. It vests over this period of time. You leave your money in, you grow it, da-da-da. This is like, hey, here's a thing no one else can possibly do. These consistent returns. We make these really good, it's an appeal to escape from the way that investments should work because it is a lie. Like, that's the...
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And yeah, and what just hit me was the fact that there are two characters in here that said the exact same thing that I just said. Like, Xavier was like, I figured out how his fund works. And
Yes.
Kaspersky was also like, this doesn't sound right. Something's wrong. And so the fact that I'm like, this was written wrong is I'm actually like, I'm on the same page as the characters who figured out that this is wrong.
Yeah.
So that was a fascinating little journey I just went on.
Yes.
Well, and also in like taking money out in this sense in Archidas's fund, Olivia, who invests 200 grand, she's not taking from the 200 grand. She's taking extra, like her 200 grand is you know, for her it's always there. That's the thing. It's like, so it's not just
hers...
like it's not just investing in your sense of waiting 20 years and watching your account grow. It's passive, immediate income, and a lot of it too, and which is obviously too good to be true.
Yeah, hers was another that I thought was interesting because it said specifically that her apartment was being paid for monthly by the gains from her account. And I remember sitting there and I was like, okay, if the taxes are this, then how is she making so much that and it wasn't supposed to make sense. So yeah.
Yeah. It's also bold of you to assume that these guys are reporting stuff properly such that they're paying correct tax. These guys are criminals. Like, yeah,
definitely dodging tax. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love seeing all this through Oscar's perspective. He has this great line a little bit. I've got this in 214 in the pub. Although the line for Oscar had been crossed 11 years earlier when he'd first been asked to backdate a transaction, it's possible to both know and not know something, he said later under cross-examination, and the state tore him to pieces over this. But he spoke for several of us, actually. Several of us who'd been thinking a great deal about doubleness. That knowing and not knowing, being honorable and not being honorable, knowing you're not a good person, but trying to be a good person regardless, are on the margins of the bad. We'd all die for the truth in our secret lives, or if not die exactly, then at least maybe make a couple of confidential phone calls and try to feign surprise when the authorities arrived. But in our actual lives, we were being paid an exorbitant amount of money to keep our mouths shut, and you don't have to be an entirely terrible person, we told ourselves later, to turn a blind eye to certain things, even actively participate in certain other things, when it's not just you, because who among us is fully alone in the world? There are always other people in the picture. Our salaries and bonuses covered roofs over our heads, crackers shaped like goldfish, tuition, retirement home expenses, the mortgage on Oscar's mother apartment in Warsaw, etc. And then there's the part of the equation that could somehow never be mentioned at a trial, but that seemed extremely relevant, which is that when you've worked with a given group of people for a while, calling the authority means destroying the lives of your friends. Our lawyers asked us not to bring this up on the stand, but it's a real thing, this aversion to sending your colleagues to prison. We'd worked together for a very long time. And I just think that's a really brilliant, summary of what it's like to have colleagues.
Yeah, it's a very such a passage of human folly, like encapsulated right there. But I love the detail that in his head he's describing his mother's house in Warsaw. That's his like investment property. It's under his mother's name, but he's in his head because he's so bought into his own bullshit. He's like, yeah, my mother's house in Warsaw.
Yeah, so good. Ugh, I love it.
Unless his mother is Polish, which I don't think it ever says.
Yeah, but it's still funny regardless. Just like this complete delusion. But I do love this idea that Mandel introduces that is like a theme throughout her books, which is like it's possible to know and not know something. Like it's possible to know something and at the same time not know it, which is like a real thing where you like actively know something is the case, but then also you don't know it at the same time.
Because like even like I don't know, conscience is a hell of a thing, eh? Like you like layers and layers of delusion you could be in, but still like you to some degree like you do know deep down that like you there's going to be consequence because you are guilty, and like it's such a human thing to take the path of least resistance in terms of like doing these somersaults in your head. Like the path of most resistance is acknowledging that you are like the one most at fault, and therefore the paths you take in your mind are the paths that Oscar takes, like, all these excuses about, you worked for these people for so long, and it started as a very small, innocuous thing that snowballed, and it's like, because it was such a gradual change, it's hard to fully comprehend, the scope of the crimes and why it was so bad and stuff like that, and like, oh, poor me, poor this, it's all very, very human.
Yeah. And it all happens so slowly. Like, it's
Mm.
no one sits down and goes, today I'm going to start doing crime. It's like these constant compromises,
Yeah.
I had I read a sentence and had a realization while y'all were talking that apparently Faisal killed himself directly as a result of the Ponzi scheme wiping out everything that he had, and he had gotten like his whole extended family to invest. So like everyone that he knew lost so much that he killed himself. And at least two of the ghosts, the first one, the ghost that Paul was seeing, was from the kid that he got killed. And Al-Qaeda was seeing the ghost of Faisal in his cell, who was someone that he got killed. And there were several more ghosts that Al-Qaeda saw out in the yard at the prison. And I don't remember who they were, but I wonder if they were also people that he had gotten killed. And like, is every ghost supposed to symbolize, guilt or something like that? And then how does that play into Vincent and her mom?
Well, he sees Olivia's ghost, and that, like, like, you could make some connection there about, like, because when Olivia lost her savings, she was quite old, that put a lot of stress on her. It probably maybe accelerated her cells dying. I don't know a better way to put that, but
She has lost the
yeah,
will
I
to
think
live.
yeah. But yeah, like, it's just there is a direct expression of guilt there that Al-Qaeda can effortlessly make in his mind, and which obviously, like, speaks a lot to the truth of how he sees it and how his conscience sees it, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's also like a logistics thing happening there where it is literally like people see the ghost of people sometimes the second after they die. There is something there as well about like the temporal relationship that this world has with these hauntings. Because at one point Jonathan sees Vincent in the prison, and it's like literally the second she dies. Like, you get that from Paul as well. There's something there too. Whether any of that's really happening or not is sort of maybe not the point. I just want to touch on one more thing from the collapse, and then we can take a quick break and then talk about Miranda and Leon and Paul. There's this really great line. This is absolutely devastating to anyone who's an executive. This is on 221 in the EPUB. Perhaps Simone was shredding documents precisely because she was only a receptionist, and Al-Qaeda didn't think she would understand anything she saw. He was an intelligent man, but he suffered from the tendency of certain long-term senior executives to think of receptionists as office fixtures, not quite on the level of the filing cabinets, but close. Perhaps because Simone was not just new to the office, but new to the world, polished in that young in midtown way, but after all only 23 years old, Al-Qaeda was counting on her naivete, thinking that perhaps she wasn't someone who would necessarily know that being asked to stay late and help her boss clear up some space in the file cabinets was a probable indicator of a cover-up. Or perhaps the paper shredding was something of a token effort, and we'd already reached the point where it didn't really matter who saw that. But the phrase that I think is just like, and again, we know that Emily St John Mandel fucking hates capitalism, but the sentence, he suffered from the tendency of certain long-term senior executives to think of receptionists as office fixtures, is so good, especially tied in with how when they're at home, Jonathan like doesn't see, like, he admits it to Vincent at one point. He's like, I know it makes me a bad person, but like I don't even see the help anymore. Like, they're invisible to me. And she has that thought of like, she worries about one day she's going to wake up and not see these people as people anymore. You know?
Which is really ironic because he met Vincent when she was one of those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it produces an interesting idea for me where like Vincent, who is like us, one of the people, even she thinks that she might become like that. And it's nothing to do necessarily with her as a person, but like everything to do with the setting, and sort of just like this implication that like I don't know, like wealth is like the only thing that makes people like this. It's like the only common denominator. Because you could be wealthy and not be like that, but you can only be like that if you're wealthy, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's capital realism. It's like the idea that like everything is underpinned by capital, and that like certain things become physically possible because of capital. And that maybe that's like not a good thing.
Yeah.
I want to argue it's not necessarily being wealthy. It is seeing yourself as a higher status person than someone else, right? So that's why, like, you see so many people at restaurants or whatever, and they'll like curse out the waiter or whatever, and like they'll treat this person who is seen and in that setting as a servant, and in this setting they are inferior to this customer. And so this customer all of a sudden jumps into the mindset of what the wealthy live like all the time. Right? But it's only in that like certain setting where you have someone who are supposed to be subservient to you in this setting. That makes sense?
Yeah, but I'd still argue that setting is still very much mediated by money and wealth. Like the only reason, and the reason why they feel like if they're the rude entitled customers, the reason they think that they can behave like that is because they're like people paying good money to be at this restaurant, and this person who the waiter is there because they are less rich and therefore they have less status, and they're there to serve them, kind of thing. I still all think it kind of ties back to money.
Just real quick, the reason I'm like kind of arguing against that thought is because at least over here, a lot of the people you see with that mentality are actually extremely poor. So it's not like actually a rich thing. And maybe it's just like, if I give you any money, then I deserve to control you. I don't know, but that's where I was coming from. Is like you will see some really poor people that are acting with this mentality that they are wealthy and can tell the server or the gas station attendant or whatever, like they can treat them like the wealthy treat everyone, but it doesn't make sense because they are poor. They are not wealthy.
Okay, so this is
that explains all the Trump voters, I suppose.
Yeah, so this is what originally the term emotional labor meant, is the way that people, when someone is paying money, there are certain jobs that someone is required to do emotional labor of behaving a particular way regardless of the circumstance, right? So like you would say that one of the things that those people are doing in those situations is they're expecting that person that they are paying money, like let's say it's a waiter or whatever, they're expecting them to do certain emotional labor in exchange for a certain amount of money, right? And one of the kind of evolving critiques from Marx's original work is this idea that like that exchange value of that emotional labor is never equivalent to the emotional labor itself. Someone's getting paid $20 an hour to wait a table and deal with you being an absolute cunt to them, just being the worst fucking person on the planet for 30 minutes at a time or for an hour at a time because, to your point, Darth, they've paid, they feel entitled. That emotional labor is never equivalent to the amount of money that person is being paid, because the exchange value of that emotional labor is so much lower than the use value, which is to say, if you're genuinely happy for like an hour because you're hanging around with your family or doing something you enjoy, that is worth so much more than having to force yourself to pretend to be happy and do emotional labor because someone's paying you. And so I think, Darth, what you're identifying is that there's a distinction between what the book is pointing out with Jonathan specifically and the executive cast who have been so wealthy for so long that every single person except them becomes subservient to their emotional labor, because in some way everyone around them is beholden to their money and their wealth, versus the way that that manifests in normal people, which is the behavior that you're describing, which is somewhat detached from how much money that person actually has, and is instead a product of capitalism and the way that emotional labor is something that certain types of people, whether it's class, age range, demographic, geography, ethnicity, there's tons and tons of things that go into it. Certain kinds of people expect that emotional labor where other people don't, right? Go to Italy, you could not pay waiters to smile unless they're actually happy. They don't give a fuck. They'll half of the people that you go and order an espresso from are fucking miserable. The other half are like happy to see you. They don't mediate their behavior just because they're being paid. Like it is also cultural in that regard. But yes, I understand what you were saying, Darth, and I just want to make the distinction that one of them is like a symptom, and then one of them is the part of the underlying problem. If that makes sense.
There was a related, very short passage in there where I think they're sitting at a poolside after a party or something, and they're watching people clean up. And there's a short passage where Vincent locks eyes with a woman who is picking up the chairs, and it's like a young woman that could be in the same position that Vincent's in, and I don't know, it just came off really odd to me that it's an extended eye contact, and it feels like the woman might be mad at Vincent, and Vincent says she averts her gaze immediately because that's what the world of wealthy is supposed to do. You're not supposed to look at the help or something like that. And I keep thinking about that, and I'm like, what is the fact that the server was staring so aggressively at Vincent supposed to be saying? Because it never really goes into it, like all this other stuff we've talked about, where it doesn't really give the context to what the other person was thinking at the time.
Well, Vincent
that server just had the biggest doobie around the corner, and they were just like,
just fucking. Well, the Vincent looks away because she's worried that this person is going to see that she's one of them, that she's not actually wealthy, and that Vincent feels this tremendous guilt about this life that she's leading. And so she's afraid that this person who's the help is going to see that she's not really a wealthy person and that she's actually one of them, and then that person is going to know, oh, you're a terrible person because you should know better. You know, that's the throughput of that in that scene. Yeah.
I'm just reminded of an opposite dynamic in Succession when Kendall like goes off and does some drugs with like these random guys in their house, and they're clearly like not very, they're quite poor, and Kendall's like got his like nice coat on, and he's chopping up cocaine with like his gold credit card or whatever, and there's just like this really like uncomfortable tension where he thinks everything is chill, but like these two guys, they're like, what's this super rich dude like doing in here? Like this is not an equal dynamic we've got going on here.
That's a real like thing in the show, like, because that's in Mad Men as well, when Don it's like way later on when he hooks up with the artist chick from like the first episode, and he goes and like they're all smoking weed and shit, and he's just there in his suit. It's like so awkward.
Yeah.
And they're all like super critical of him. It's really uncomfortable. All right, let's take a very quick break, and then we'll come back to talk about Leon and then the end of this book. So we'll be right back. If you like these handcrafted studies of genre fiction, please head over to zeroindent.com or patreon.com/zeroindent if you'd like to consider supporting us. Even if you just give us a follow on Patreon, that helps us out. Leave a comment, a like, and if you're in a financial position to do so, you can support us and get access to early content, additional videos, director's commentaries, audio diaries, and all kinds of different things we have coming up. It really makes a difference helping keep independent media crit alive. Once again, that is zeroindent.com or patreon.com/zeroindent if you'd like to support us. All right, welcome back. Leon's back. Leon and Miranda, of course, from Station 11 in here too. We kind of get Leon living in the wake of the scam and sort of his entire life falling apart. I also really like this feeling that that there's a kind of how would you say it? Like, you know, there's this conversation which Miranda and Leon have about disaster, which is like some real Emily St John Mandel stuff. And they're talking about the corporate emergency of like Vincent, you know, falling off this boat. And they talk about it as like the most predictable disaster. They're like, you know, there's nothing that like, this is the most obvious thing that would ever happen in this situation. And yet all of these executives are always so shocked and confused. Like they didn't see every piece of evidence before this thing went wrong. And there's this thing that Leon kind of frames up of like, he thinks of it as kind of ego almost. This like, it's like an ego that executives develop where it's like, well, this sort of thing happens to like other people, but not to people like me. Like I'm not like everyone else. And it's really, it's a really interesting perspective, especially for a character like Leon, who you kind of spend the latter half of this book with him. It feels like he's waiting for his life to like for everything to go back to the way it was, or like for someone to come. And I think Pat was talking about this last episode, this idea of all these characters who they're all waiting for the right person to turn up and like fix their life. And I feel like Leon ends up in that position, but he's able to identify before it happens, like that this sort of stuff is inevitable. Yeah.
Were you talking about his like losing the job and everything, or specifically about Vincent dying?
That's a good question. I had this on 254. Yeah, this is about so this is the conversation they're having about the basic like shipping disaster that happens in 2008 where like no one is shipping anything because no one has any money.
Okay.
And they're all in that meeting room and they're all talking about this complete collapse of the industry as if they all hadn't seen it coming for years ahead of time.
Okay. Because I was if all of that was related to Vincent dying, then I was about to be like, she broke all the safety protocols and blah 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 blah. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like this, like, and they talk about like the ghost fleet that they put together. That they're just gonna anchor off the coast of Malaysia. It's so good. And they're like gonna have like a skeleton crew looking after it, which is obviously a mirror of what ends up happening to the Glass Hotel itself. That ghost fleet is off the coast of Malaysia in Station 11 as well, incidentally.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Except in there, Leon just tells her that it's like one ship or something, but apparently it's a whole slew of them.
In the book, it's like an entire fleet. So I don't know what they changed in the show there, but yeah.
Well, but I mean, it feels like it doesn't connect to Station 11 though, because Leon is still Miranda's boss in Station 11, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not the same timeline. At least it seems like that to me, because I feel like there's no way Leon would go back to being Miranda's boss. Like Miranda seems like she's like top dog now. I don't know, like it. Yeah, it just seems like this is slightly different reality to Station 11.
Yeah, it's just that
Some
there's
things
overlaps.
line up, like
There's
the
stuff
boats.
the stuff that line.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that line up. Yeah, which is just like really
Yeah.
cool. And it's like a cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, writing choice. Yeah.
Yeah, it is cool. Yeah.
Very very unique, and maybe we'll have a payoff later. Yeah. This might all be going somewhere. I was trying to figure out. Yeah, I've just got like the way that sort of Leon projects his own misery onto the world. Is super interesting as well. He's like he realizes that like things are gonna go wrong. I've got this in 262. This is him like projecting how miserable he is. He says a pair of showgirls walked by, 18 or 19 years old, in matching outfits. holding heavy headdresses of plumed feathers in their hands, their faces set hard with exhaustion and makeup. Not real showgirls, just girls who collected tips for posing with tourists on the sidewalk. He kept passing middle-aged men and women in red t-shirts that read, "Girls to your room in 20 minutes," handing out flyers that presumably said the same. The people passing out flyers had 1,000-yard stares and were worn down in a manner suggestive of a difficult life. Or was Leon imagining this? He didn't think he was imagining it. He stepped into a hotel lobby. He hardly noticed which one, just to get off the sidewalk. He was thinking about the girls. If they could be in your room in 20 minutes, then probably they were already here somewhere on the strip, waiting. Picture the hotel suite where the girls are waiting, the air thick with cigarette smoke and perfume. Girls staring at their phones, doing lines in the bathroom, talking about whatever it is that 20-minute girls discuss. Waiting, counting hours, counting money, hoping the next date isn't a psychopath. The vision made him profoundly sad. He could live without retirement savings. No one in this country actually starves to death. It's just one future slipping away and being replaced by another. He had his health. They could sell the house. He found a padded bench away from the other people near the entrance to the hotel casino and called his wife. "I saw the news," she said before Leon could say hello. The fear in her voice was unbearable. "How bad is it?" "It's a disaster, Marie." He realized that he was crying for the first time in well over a decade. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I am just so sorry. It's an absolute disaster." Like, goddamn.
Yeah, that bit about
was it only after the GFC that this thing about like don't put all your eggs in one basket became a popular aphorism? Because everyone in this book invested everything in one person, and
Pretty much.
it fucked everyone up. Yeah.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, like short answer is yes. Yeah, because it happened to everybody. Like all of these people would put all of their money in like investment funds or in the stock market or into a mortgage, and then yeah, all you need is for that one thing to go wrong. This is, I think this is Claire. This is related. This is Claire and Simone again talking about and thinking about work. Where they're driving back. Right, no, it's Claire and is Simone the receptionist? Yeah, and they have that really tortured like car ride where like Claire gives Simone a ride back from the office, and it's Simone had been in New York City for 6 months by now, and she thought that she was starting to understand how a person could become very tired here. She'd seen them on the subway, the tired people, the people who'd worked too long and too hard, caught up in the machine, eyes closed on the evening trains. Simone had always thought of them as citizens of a separate city, but the gap between their city and hers was beginning to close. And it's again that idea of like seeing wealth as like different countries and like different geographies and things like that Leon sort of fully embraces, I think, as he starts to see, you know, his transient life in the RV and stuff like that. You know, he sort of feels like they're in a different country to everybody else, to the normal people and to their previous life. It's like a real vivid way of imagining that, I think.
And it's the thing about country important because the reason why Vincent's death is so messy is because it's between countries, or like, you know, it's in the international waters. And it's like, yeah, so, you know, she was in this country technically, but, you know, she was a Canadian citizen, but she was I don't know, the people from this country were meant to investigate, and like, yeah, it's and so it ends up being no one's responsibility because of this like sort of like these vague, you know, rules of bureaucracy and governments and stuff like that.
Yeah, it also reminds me a little bit of this sort of concept of like when we were talking last episode about like the Glass Hotel itself and the way that it's like this complete paradox of like it's the wilderness but it's not the wilderness, like it's a facsimile of the wilderness. It's like there's this idea that like wealth both makes the world real and makes it unreal at the same time. Like it produces all these possibilities, but in producing those possibilities, it means that things stop feeling real. Like you have that great conversation with Vincent and Mirella where Vincent's like, do you ever just get bored of shopping? Like, I know that's a terrible thing to say, but like, isn't this just boring? And it's like, yeah, there's some concept here of not that, like, yeah, there's a disreality that too much wealth produces, and one of the results of that is people like Jonathan just kind of getting away with everything for as long as they do, and it takes like the Ella Kasperskys of the world and people like that, and Olivia to like hold these people accountable, because the world is so not real to them because they are so far into this distant land of money that they almost see things like it literally infects their perception, right? They stop seeing the staff as people and things like that.
Kaspersky is interesting to try to figure out, because I don't know that she was necessarily doing all of this and investigating and everything to try to like do the right thing, quote unquote. Because when she has that interaction at the diner with Jonathan and his first wife, like Jonathan just he's like, the FBI investigation is over, they didn't find anything, I'm just gonna be polite and say hi to her when they go past. And like Kaspersky almost doesn't say anything back for like a full minute, and then says like, you are so beneath my contempt I don't even acknowledge you, or something like that. Like it's like vehement, but like the why is interesting. So either like Kaspersky, what I would assume is that she was seeing her father's wealth threatened by this guy who tried to Ponzi scheme her. And so she was reacting out of anger over that. But again, I don't really know what was in her head, aside from that she was just really did not like this dude.
Take on it. I think it's also possible that she just like is has a strong like moral perspective on this whole thing, and being like, you're robbing people, and it's going to come crashing down eventually, and people are going to lose their livelihoods and stuff. I think that that's how I take it.
Yeah, I love the Suzanne, like Jonathan's like deceased wife. She like looks at Ella, and there's a small shard of glass, a broken wine glass, had been overlooked at the base of the breadbasket. Suzanne plucked it between two fingers and dropped it delicately into Kaspersky's water glass. They all watched it drift to the bottom. Suzanne leaned in close and spoke quietly. "Why don't you swallow broken glass?" There was a moment where no one spoke. "I'm sure you must hear this all the time," Ella Kaspersky said, "but you two are perfect for each other." Arcaitis took his wife's arm and steered her rapidly out of the restaurant, out onto the cold street, where the car was waiting. He bundled her in and sat beside her. He glanced over and saw that Suzanne was weeping silently, her hands over her face. He pulled her close and held her tightly, her tears falling on his coat, and they stayed like that, not speaking, all the way back to Connecticut. Like, she's, like, furious. Like, just cannot stand these people. I think that's another part of it, too, is, like, that they maybe represent everything that she doesn't like in life. Like, that these are the types of people that she thinks shouldn't be allowed to exist. I think it's also an element of.
I mean, it's interesting that she's part of that world, though. Like, her dad was wealthy, and it would be different if she was like one of like, quote unquote, the poors, because then that reaction makes a whole lot more sense. But the fact that she's part of that world, and also that angry at that world, doesn't jive with the rest of that world. She's like the one wealthy person we see that's like moral, I guess.
Yeah, which is like, I think, an important thing for the book to include, right? Like, it acknowledges that you can be inside the system, benefiting from it, and knowing it's wrong, and it making you angry. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
Although, now that we've talked about this, I have sort of come around a bit, and I'm thinking there must be more to it that makes her that angry. And I think actually you might be right, Dark, that it probably is a bit more personal, that Arcaitis went after her money. Now I'm going back to being cynical, because I'm like, that, I don't know. I feel like that such a vehement reaction makes sense if it's really personal, and like,
yeah. I mean, this is an unrelated example, but I was just responding to a YouTube comment about one of my more popular videos on Star Wars is how like too much backstory happens off screen between the main films. And I was talking with him about how like if you don't experience something along with the character, then you can't empathize with the emotions that they're going through because you didn't live it with them. And I think this is very much the same thing where it's so hard for you to care about these anonymous Ponzi scheme victims. You have no clue who they are. It's really hard for you to get that emotional, to get angry for them. But when you're picturing like your dead dad and he put together this fortune for you and you were trying to invest it, and I think it was a nonprofit that they were trying to start. So like they were trying to do something good with the money that her dad left for them, and that is something that you can experience along with her and get angry along with her. So all of that is probably where they were going with it, as opposed to just her being like morally angry, which is a lot harder to do.
It is a balancing act. I also think that like I know that you and I like disagree about like the backstory and experiencing stuff thing, like, which is fine. But like I do think that it is a particular trick with Ella as a character where I think that if you look at someone like Olivia by contrast, you immediately empathize with Olivia, to your point, Darth, because you follow her having a really shitty life, never quite making it as a painter, and then this is her way out. I think it's like a promise of like a different life. For Ella, it's like she's pissed off because the audacity of Jonathan. It's almost this thing of like, no, you rob other people, you don't rob people like us. Like this is crossing some line in coming after your own type thing. I could also see someone reading it that way. Of like, you don't rip off the wealthy. That's not what we do.
I think Olivia's a really good example here because like is her point in the story for us to get to know her so that when her entire fortune is wiped out because of the Ponzi scheme and then we are watching her suffer, we don't care about any of the other investors because we never got to know them, but we know her. So she's filling that gap, and now we can be angry at Jonathan because of her, just like Kaspersky and her dad.
Well, yeah, I also think that's the point of Leon, right? Like, you get to it, like, you stay so close with Leon that, like, and you watch him try and cope with everything that's happened, and he makes peace with it, sort of. But then the second there's the promise of going back to anything except the life he's living, he just, like, attaches to that completely.
Yeah, his was all after the fact,
yeah.
Wasn't it? Like, we don't... Yeah.
You get a little bit of them meeting in the hotel beforehand. That's when they have that great conversation about logistics. But yeah, certainly from a money perspective. I mean, the other thing you got to keep in mind is that Mandela's with Leon specifically, she's benefiting from the fact that he's in the first book, as is Miranda. So she's able to leverage a bit of like, these are people you already have some familiarity with. But yeah, I don't know. Ella's a weird one, man. I'm really not sure what to make of her anger. Other than it feels right in the book, like it feels emotionally consistent for her to be that to be that angry. And it's wrapped around and sort of like conflated and mediated by the fact that like Suzanne is dying of cancer, and it's just such a like disastrous exchange for all the great reasons that I love in stories. I guess let's quickly talk about Leon then, and then we can maybe talk about the ending. So Leon kind of we follow him after the collapse. He's sort of him and his wife end up in this RV, and he ends up we already touched on this, but he talks about like the ShadowCountry, or he calls it the Shadowlands. Talks about like shelters and seeing homeless people, and aware that there were people here who slipped beneath the surface of society into a territory without comfort or room for error. They hitchhiked on roads with their worldly belongings in backpacks. They collected cans on the street of cities. They stood on the strip in Las Vegas wearing t-shirts that said, "Girls to your room in 20 minutes." They were the girls in the room. He'd seen the ShadowCountry, its outskirts, and signs. He just never thought he'd have anything to do with it. In the ShadowCountry, it was necessary to lie down every night with a fear so powerful that it felt to Leon like a physical presence, some malevolent beast that absorbs the light. He lay beside Marie and remembered that in his life there was no space for any kind of error or misfortune. What would happen to her if something happened to him? Marie hadn't been well in some time. His fear was a weight on his chest in the dark. And then Miranda calls him and goes, "Hey, I've got this consulting job." And suddenly it's like a way out of this terrible life that he's found himself in because of this scheme.
You know what does a really good job of portraying the Shadow Country is Better Call Saul.
Job of portraying the
all about,
Shadow Country.
This world, this autonomous, like autotelic world that operates like outside
autonomous, like autotelic world that operates like outside the
structure,
the periphery
and institutions and governance
of
and stuff
society
like that.
and structure and institutions and governance
whole
and stuff
ass
like
lives
that.
being
Realize
lived in the Shadow
there's
Country.
whole ass lives
rich
being
and
lived in
dangerous
the
and
Shadow Country,
as anything else.
rich and dangerous and interesting as anything else, kind of thing.
Yeah, with all these like hidden rules and structures and like I love the when you start to get more of like Gus Fring and the chicken shop and stuff like that, and just like watching how quickly Nacho goes from like kind of compromised to like completely compromised, because there's just these levers that kept getting put, like, you know, it's that thing that we were talking about earlier, like you do it once, then that necessitates doing it again, and it's just like a slippery slope into this other world, this other country that's like just beneath the real country, you know. Yeah,
it's got to sting your pride if your former subordinate becomes your boss, like, and then you dependent on them to, like, you know, live and get money.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
I feel for Leon. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that she says that he pretends that he's retired because he doesn't want to admit what's really
yeah.
It's so tragic. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty rough.
And I like how much Miranda has adapted to being who she is now as well. Like, you know, it's just more examples of like how I guess like effortlessly money transforms people, because it's such an easy, comforting motivation and a desire to have. It's just to get more money. You know, understandably, yeah, but it's in terms, as far as like transformations go, like money just it makes that so easy for you to change as a person.
Yeah, I think Vincent talked about that earlier, that like money itself wasn't the thing of value, it was like the freedom it gives you or something like that.
It's the freedom to not think about money. Yeah. And I love this idea of the Shadow Country as well, because when Vincent goes overboard, you get Miranda explaining what's happened to Leon on the phone, and then that little section ends with the phrase, "It is possible to disappear in the space between countries." And if you think about that not just as literal countries, but also the Kingdom of Money and the Shadow Country and things like that, like there are all of these like other worlds within worlds that it's possible to like slip between the cracks that exist between those. In a very literal sense, Vincent disappears between them.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say. Is that's how they phrase her ghosting later on, is slipping between the different like the different worlds that her people are in that she's visiting. There was a lot of that kind of like imagery where it's crossing a border is constantly talked about, and then when she dies and she's being a ghost, and it has that same type of description. Speaking of which, let's speed run this because I'm about to have to bounce.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna say you got a hot out. Let me flick through. Let's talk about the ending. So, Vincent in the Ocean is the last section of the book. The TLDR with Leon is he basically covers up that they think that Jeffrey killed Vincent. They cover it up, and he never gets another consulting job again.
and he does the dirty thing and doesn't get paid for it.
I know.
Like,
And Leon just can't catch a break. But yeah, so then we flash back to Vincent in the Ocean. And this is difficult because I can't read the whole thing and I wish I could. But yeah, she is in a mood because her and Jeffrey have an argument. She goes out onto the ship when she shouldn't. And she's filming over the deck, and she falls over. And as she's in the middle of the storm, she thinks she's alone, but then she thinks she sees a woman. And then she says, "No, she's there. I can see her almost. The light is still flickering, the deck intermittently illuminated. The horror is that this other person is somehow intermittent too, less than a human figure than a disturbance in the air. A shadow that appears on the railing and then fades, a presence approaching. She is very close now. There's an impression of a hand on the railing, a silhouette, and then Olivia Collins is standing beside me at the bow, looking down at the water." And then Vincent falls in. And then she starts to flash, right? She starts to flash through these various parts of her life. It's almost worth... Listen, if you're not going to read the book, just read this last section, because the prose here is incredible. She sort of flashes between these different moments of holding her mother's hand and things like that. Different moments of her childhood with Paul, different moments with Paul. The thing that we didn't say as well for Paul is that we got a little section between these two where you go to Paul's life now. He's like a successful musician in his 50s, but he's a heroin addict. And he has like a really bizarre like drink with Olivia. It's so strange. And then he's sitting on these... Ella. Right, it's Ella, yeah. Because Olivia's already dead. And afterwards he's sitting on like the street corner and he sees Vincent in her like chef's uniform at the exact moment that she falls overboard and dies. And yeah, it basically, the book ends with her on the beach with her mother, sort of having finally come home. And the one thing I did want to touch on very, very quickly is she also flashes through to Sweep Me Up, which were the words that she wrote on the wall all those years ago. I didn't say this last time because I didn't know this last time. Sweep Me Up is actually those are Kierkegaard's like apocryphal last words. And it's one of those things where like the apocryphal part of it is that it wasn't actually the last thing he said. It was just part of what he said before he went to hospital, before he died, which again is talking to that time and perspective stuff. But yeah, then the very ending is she sees a bunch of people, and I'm trying to find the last page. Yeah, I look for Paul again and find him in the desert, outside a low white building that seems to shine in the twilight. He just stepped out of the door and he's lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. He looks up and sees me, drops the cigarette and retrieves it. "You," he says. "It's you, isn't it? You're really there." I don't know how to answer either of those questions, I tell him. "I was just talking about you," he says, "in my session just now. I was just telling my counselor all the things I've never told anyone." Can't see his face clearly in the fading light, but he sounds like he's been crying. "Vincent, before you go again, can I just tell you?" "Tell me what?" "I'm sorry," he says. "I'm sorry for all of it." "I was a thief too," I tell him. "We both got corrupted." And I can tell he doesn't understand, but I don't want to stay here and explain to him that somewhere else I'd rather be. So I move away from the desert and away from Paul, all the way to Kayet. I'm on the beach, not far from the pier where the mail boat comes in, and my mother is here. She's sitting some distance away on a driftwood log, hands folded on her lap, with an air of waiting calmly for an appointment. Her hair is still braided. She's still 36 years old, still in the red cardigan she was wearing the day she disappeared. It was an accident, of course. She would never have left me on purpose. She has waited so long for me. She was always here. This was always home. She's gazing at the ocean, at the waves on the shore, and she looks up in amazement when I say her name.
Mhm.
Yeah, dude, I was having a hard one this was tough when I read this. I was like real emotional.
Yeah, it was a good ending.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Part of me wondered why they did the drama with between Paul and her about the videotapes, because it arguably would have been better for his career if he had done them as a tribute to like his long lost sister. Like, I think that would have played better for the audience rather than him just claiming that the videos were stuff that he shot. So the whole thing about like stealing them kind of felt like disingenuous, and it was just like only in there to cause the drama between the two of them. But also, that was such a minor thought; it didn't really matter to me. But
Well, he also stole them while she
just
was
wanna say.
alive.
Well, and
Like, he'd been famous for like 10 years.
I also feel like saying that, like, oh, it's a tribute to my sister, that's like a bigger line to cross. It's like, it's much more dishonest, you know, than just like saying that you, I don't know, maybe not, but it's how I feel.
Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty shitty however you spin it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I meant like my sister shot these, and so I put music to them. Like he could have made her part. He could have given her credit for it, and like the fact that he didn't, I don't really know what that's saying for for the story or his character arc or whatever. I guess he's always acted very selfishly, so maybe it just tracked.
Well, he just doesn't have a good relationship with Vincent. And like even before she met Al-Qaeda, right? And then I guess they sort of did. They were working together and stuff. But like as soon as she became like Al-Qaeda's girlfriend, they never talked, and like I don't know. It's probably just he might have thought he was never gonna like really interact with her again, or at least in any meaningful way. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Paul is just a shit person. Like, I think this is like fundamentally, he is an inadequate person and kind of has been his whole life. Yeah.
Yeah, earlier talking about when I was like devil's advocate, Al-Qaeda might not be like a quote unquote bad person. I was going to say, but Paul probably is.
Yeah. I could see that.
But then we start trying to like quantify like morality or whatever.
Right. And, you know, this podcast is the arbiter of morality. So we could do that, of course. But we don't have the time, unfortunately, because Darth has a heart out. Look, final thoughts on this. Yeah, where have we landed? Anything that you guys want to touch on before we wrap up?
I just want to touch on the thing about Ghost, because I agree with you guys. Like, I think it is. There's a lot of attention paid to like supernatural things being, occurring, and like be at least in terms of the story being real for the story. But I also like how there is, for me, there's enough explanation to make it like not supernatural, because I really like the line where Paul sees Vincent in a, and it's curious that he sees her in a cook uniform. He doesn't know that, but then he has the line, maybe I retroactively added that detail in years later after I heard her story and that she was working on the ship and stuff like that. So there's like just enough room for doubt there, that and I think that's clever. I like it.
Yeah. It does these really nice little undercuts, so you're never quite sure what's real and what isn't. Yeah. But yes, I think the question of ghosts is like a thing that I want you guys to hold on to. And that question of reality and all the things we talked about with Station 11. Keep that in the back of your heads as we read the next book. Darth, closing thoughts?
I was going to argue the opposite, that I think that the way that it was written proves that the ghosts were real. But it's also playing one of the tricks that I despise in filmmaking, which is where they show you something that turns out to either be a dream, or something like that, where they show you something that's not real, and it shouldn't work like that. Like, if she has the cook uniform on when Paul sees her, then it's not something that he made up later because we saw it then. Does that make sense? Like we experienced it with him, and we saw her as the audience with the cook uniform on because that's what he said. So he can't go back and a paragraph later, he can't say I recontextualized that might not have happened because we already experienced it. So like that's something I despise in TV shows where they'll show like a dream of Karen getting throttled by Kingpin, and then 10 seconds later, oh, that never happened. And I'm like, well, what's the like? I get it, but don't show me
once
that.
again fails to understand how subjectivity works. Also, if you want to be fucking,
I understand, I don't appreciate.
If you want to be
difference.
If you want to be fucking logical about it, everything from Paul's perspective is him reflecting on all of this 30 years later in rehab. So
yeah,
what you've just said is absolutely possible.
This book has a weird relationship with tense, like, because I feel like a lot of it is present tense, the prose, but it's always framed by, like, in the start of the book, by like characters being like reflecting on their past and stuff that happened years ago. And then they constantly like jump between like experiencing a present in the moment and then a reflection they have of that memory years later. And it's like, I think it's very cool.
Yeah, the therapist is something I wish that they had tied in more, because the beginning starts off with Paul talking to that therapist like 30 years in the future or whatever, and then it never comes, like, that should have progressed throughout the book, or it shouldn't have been in the beginning, in my opinion. Because that would have tied everything together a whole lot more, especially with the time jumps. This sounds very negative. I did appreciate it. I did like the whole book. Very much like David said, the way that a lot of it doesn't flow, maybe thematically throughout the whole thing, made it a lot less. It like bumped down on my favorites list, But first read through, I was over the moon for it. Now that you made me think about it, it's a little bit less, but I still love it. I'll definitely reread it several times.
Yeah, it's definitely not my favorite Mandel book, but I still think it's so funny. It's like, of the books there are, this is in the S tier, but of the sub tier that is Emily St John Mandel, it's maybe only an A tier for her. Like that's the level she's operating at. When she writes a book that isn't perfect, it's already incredible, like, as a baseline. Yeah. Speaking of, next episode we are reading Sea of Tranquility by Emily St John Mandel. And the stopping point for next episode is we're reading through 4. They're not called chapters; they're just numbered. But it's basically read through 4 to up to Bad Chickens, which is the name of the next chapter, and that's up to page 136 in the EPUB. So you're reading up to and through Bad Chickens up to page 136 in the EPUB. So the next page when you stop should be the start of 5, basically. Cool. All right. Pluggables very quickly. I'm conscious Darth has to go. Darth, YouTube, tell them what you got going on.
DARTH_D on YouTube. I've got several ideas for. I'm going to try a bunch of like micro essays and just kind of see how they trend. Because nothing has been going well so far, and I've been getting comments that like my channel's like blacklisted on people's notifications. So I'm gonna have to research that. So yeah, if you've got any information there for me, drop that in the comment section. So yeah, I've got a bunch of like little short ideas, and like maybe even like 60-second little short essays, kind of see how those trend. Maybe try some like YouTube shorts in there and see what the algorithm does.
Love it. Links, as always, down below in the show notes. Patrick Laverne, where can people find more of you on the internet, should they so desire?
A Method to the Madness on YouTube. We're also on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. We have a website, amttm.com. If you like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. We have a lot of that content, and I know Gilligan's making a new show right now. We might cover that in the future. But the other half of AMTTM is over in the States. So yeah, it might be a little while. Who knows?
Yeah, we're on break. We're on indefinite break until we can line our shit up again. Excellent. As always, links down below. If you'd like to support us, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent. Supporting us at the $5 tier unlocks the bonus episodes of this show, where we watch and talk about supplementary materials. The most recent episode is me and Patrick talking about Hollow Knight and Silksong and Dark Souls and capitalism. We are planning to do something in the lead up to Christmas, which is I have gathered everything I've read and watched this year, and we're going to do a tier list. And then hopefully, if time permits, we're going to do a tier list for each of you as well. I have to book those in. I'm very excited. I gathered my list, and holy shit, I have read a lot of books this year. Free Patreon subscribers gain access to the Zero Indent Patreon chat, where you can send us questions and ideas for future episodes directly, or just DM me on Patreon, which is what people have started doing. Any support you can give us helps us keep making thoughtful, independent media criticism an important thing to preserve in an age where context is defined by algorithms. We appreciate all of our Patreon subscribers who help us continue to make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. Thanks once again for an excellent episode. We appreciate you watching or listening. Wherever you consume this, consider giving us a follow, comment, a like, subscribe, whatever that interaction is. It's how we get new listeners. It's how people find the show. And as always, it's just the end of the world. Nope. That's not right. That's not it. It's just the end. You can't even tell I'm tired. It's just the end of the show. It's not the end of the world. Jesus, I literally read it back to front.
It's the end of the world.
It's the end of the world, brother. Oh, Jesus Christ. Ugh.
That's how the episode ends. It's just the end of the world. Nope. Black.
Zero Indent is an independent publication dedicated to studying works of genre fiction, brought to you by our subscribers. Head to patreon.com/zeroindent to learn more and consider supporting us. Our theme song is The Swan by Alon Peretz. Our podcast cover art is by Crystal Hatay. Everything else is written, directed, and edited by me, DC McNeil. You can find our merch and books at underink.press and everything we do at zeroindent.com.